The desert didn't forgive mistakes. Cole Mercer had learned that truth the hard way, through bullet wounds, betrayals, and nights spent sleeping with one eye open and a revolver under his bedroll. He'd survived 3 years drifting through the borderlands between empires and revolutions, selling his gun to whoever paid in gold rather than promises. Ideals were expensive luxuries. Survival was the only currency that mattered. The sun hammered down on the rocky outcrop where Cole lay prone, his fingers steady on the grip of his Winchester repeater. Sweat traced lines through the dust on his face. His gray eyes, cold and calculating as a card-sharp counting marked cards, tracked the 3 men loading the wagon below. They moved with the nervous urgency of thieves who knew they were being hunted. Smart. The canyon was a natural choke point, walled on 3 sides by rust-colored cliffs that held heat like a forge. Scrub brush clung to cracks in the stone, and the only sound besides the occasional clink of harness and muttered Spanish curses was the lazy circle of buzzards overhead. Cole had been tracking these men for 2 days. They'd left a trail of bodies and burned homesteads behind them, revolutionaries, or bandits pretending to be revolutionaries. In this part of the world, the distinction didn't matter much. What mattered was the canvas bag they were loading with such care, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with hemp rope, stained dark with something that might have been blood. The jewels. Or at least that's what General Salazar Cruz had told him they were. Rubies the size of plums, emeralds like frozen fire, diamonds that had once decorated the necks of imperial courtesans, stolen during a raid on a military paymaster's convoy 3 weeks ago, worth enough to fund an entire rebel campaign or let one cynical American disappear into a new life somewhere laws and wars couldn't reach. "Recover my property," Salazar had said, his scarred face expressionless in the candlelight of his command tent. "Kill anyone who stands in your way. Bring me the jewels, and I'll pay you 10,000 American dollars in gold." Cole had taken the job without hesitation. 10,000 was enough to buy a ranch in California or a shipping passage to somewhere the past couldn't follow. Maybe both. But first, he had to take the jewels from men who'd already killed for them. The tallest of the 3, a lean man with a bandolier across his chest and a cavalry saber bouncing against his hip, turned suddenly, scanning the canyon rim. Cole froze, controlling his breathing, becoming just another shadow among the rocks. The man's instincts were good. Probably a deserter from one of the imperial regiments. Those were always the most dangerous. Men who'd been trained to kill and had decided to freelance. After a long moment, the man turned back to his companions. Cole exhaled slowly. The wagon was almost loaded. If they made it to open ground, he'd lose them. The border crossing was only 15 miles south, and once they were across, even Salazar's network couldn't touch them. It was now or never. He aimed carefully, leading the tall man's movement by half a breath, and squeezed the trigger. The Winchester cracked like thunder in the confined space. The tall man spun, clutching his shoulder, his shout of pain echoing off stone walls. His companions dove for cover, dragging rifles from the wagon bed. Return fire came fast, wild shots that sparked off rocks and whined into empty air. Cole was already moving, scrambling along the ridge with the practiced speed of a man who'd survived too many ambushes to stay still. He found new cover behind a boulder, chambered another round, and fired at the muzzle flash below. A scream confirmed the hit. 2 down, 1 to go. But the 3rd man was smarter. He'd grabbed the canvas bag and was running, not toward the wagon, but deeper into the canyon where the walls narrowed into a crack barely wide enough for a man. If he made it through, he'd disappear into the labyrinth of arroyos and dead ends that made this territory perfect for smugglers and ghosts. Cole cursed and broke from cover, sliding down the scree slope in a controlled fall that sent rocks clattering. His boots hit level ground hard, jarring his knees, but he didn't slow. The canyon walls closed around him like a vice as he pursued the fleeing figure. The man glanced back, terror written across his young face. Barely 20, Cole realized, probably some farmer's son who'd joined the revolution for excitement and found only blood. He stumbled, the heavy bag throwing him off balance. "Stop running!" Cole shouted in Spanish. "Give me the bag and you live!" The young man didn't listen. They never did. He squeezed through the narrow crack in the canyon wall, and Cole followed, his shoulders scraping stone on both sides. The passage opened into a small clearing ringed by towering rock faces. a natural dead end. The young revolutionary turned, dropping the bag and drawing a revolver with shaking hands. "Don't," Cole said, his Winchester aimed center mass. "You're not a killer, boy. Walk away." You're the American," the young man's voice cracked. "They said you'd come. Salazar's devil." "I'm nobody's devil. I'm just doing a job. For blood money, for stolen—" The crack of a rifle shot cut him off, but it hadn't come from Cole. The young man's eyes went wide with shock as he looked down at the spreading red stain across his chest. He dropped to his knees, then pitched forward into the dust. Cole spun, his rifle sweeping the canyon rim, heart hammering. Someone else was here. Someone who just killed his only witness. A figure stood silhouetted against the brutal blue sky, rifle still raised. As Cole's eyes adjusted, he could make out more details. A woman's shape, lean and precise, dressed in dusty traveling clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed her face. "You're welcome," she called down in English, her accent refined, European, definitely not local. "I didn't ask for help," Cole said, keeping his rifle trained on her. "No, but you needed it." She lowered her weapon with deliberate slowness. "He was going to shoot you. Young men with nothing to lose are always the most dangerous." "Who are you?" "Someone with similar interests to yours, Mr. Mercer." She began picking her way down the rock face with the confidence of a mountain goat. Though perhaps with better information, Cole's jaw tightened. She knew his name. That complicated things. "The bag's mine. I'm working for General Salazar." The woman reached the canyon floor and removed her hat, revealing sharp features, dark hair pulled back severely, and eyes the color of amber. Mid-30s, Cole guessed, with the kind of contained elegance that suggested money and education, wildly out of place in this hell of dust and violence. "Salazar," she repeated, something like amusement in her tone. "Yes, I'm sure he promised you a fortune. 10,000 in gold, perhaps?" Cole said nothing, but his finger tightened slightly on the trigger. She noticed. "Relax, Mr. Mercer. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. I had a clear shot for the last 30 seconds. She walked past him to the canvas bag and crouched beside it. "The question is, do you actually know what you're stealing? Jewels, military payroll, Salazar's property." "Salazar's property," she laughed, a sharp sound without humor. "That's one way to describe it." She untied the hemp rope and pulled back the oilcloth, revealing Cole's breath caught. Not jewels. Not treasure. Stacks of papers bound with string, documents with official seals, maps marked with strategic positions, coded messages. And underneath, a smaller leather pouch that clinked with the unmistakable sound of coins. The woman opened the pouch and dumped a handful of stones into her palm. They caught the light, glittering, but Cole could see immediately they were worthless, colored glass, clever fakes. "Welcome to the game," the woman said softly, "where nothing is what it seems and everyone is lying." Cole's mind raced. Salazar had sent him after fake jewels. Why? To keep him busy? To use him as bait? Or because the real treasure was something else entirely, something hidden in these documents? "Who are you?" he asked again. "My name is Elena Varga. Sister Elena Varga, if we're being formal." She stood, brushing dust from her knees. "Though I haven't worn the habit in 6 months, not since I decided that saving souls was less urgent than preventing a war." A nun, or former nun. Cole processed that, finding no angle that made sense. "You're a long way from any church." "So are you, Mr. Mercer, and yet here we both are, standing over a dead boy, fighting for secrets neither of us fully understands." She picked up the documents, handling them with reverence. These papers contain troop movements, supply routes, and the locations of weapons caches belonging to 3 different factions. Whoever controls this information controls the next 6 months of fighting in this region. And the fake jewels? A test or a trap. Salazar is many things, but he's not stupid. He knew the jewels would attract attention from imperial forces, from rival revolutionaries, from mercenaries like you. Elena's gaze sharpened. "The question is whether you're clever enough to realize you're expendable." Cole had worked for enough warlords and generals to know expendable when he heard it. Salazar had sent him into a storm of crossfire, probably expecting him to die or get captured. Either way, the American drifter would be one less complication. The realization should have angered him. Instead, it clarified things. "So what's your play?" he asked. Elena smiled, a dangerous expression that reminded Cole of rattlesnakes sunning themselves on rocks. "I'm going to sell these documents to the highest bidder. Imperial forces, revolutionaries, arms dealers, everyone will pay fortunes to know what's in here. I could retire on what these papers are worth. And you're telling me this because? Because you're going to help me." She gestured to the dead men in the canyon. "You've already been marked as Salazar's agent. Every faction in this territory will be hunting you. Your choices are simple. Run and hide until someone puts a bullet in your back, or help me turn this disaster into profit." Cole studied her. Elena Varga was either brilliant or insane, possibly both. But she was right about one thing. The moment he'd accepted Salazar's job, he'd painted a target on his own back. Running would only delay the inevitable. "What's my cut?" he asked. 40%? 50. 45, and I provide intelligence on who's chasing us. Cole considered. A former nun with military documents and enough brass to propose selling secrets in a war zone. It was insane. It was also the best offer he was likely to get. "Deal," he said. They shook hands, her grip firm and dry despite the heat. "Good," Elena said. "Then we should leave. Now. General Salazar will have scouts tracking you, and when you don't return with the jewels, he'll send killers. We need to be 50 miles from here before sunset. There's a trading post north of the border, neutral territory. We can make contact with buyers there." "Perfect." Elena gathered the documents and rewrapped them carefully. "Oh, and Mr. Mercer, one more thing." "What?" "We're not the only ones looking for these papers. There's a man, an aristocrat named Viktor Dragunov, calls himself a duke, though whether the title's legitimate is anyone's guess. He's been tracking the document trail for weeks. He's dangerous, unpredictable, and absolutely ruthless." "Another player in the game," Cole muttered. "The most dangerous one." Elena's expression turned grim. Dragunov doesn't care about sides or causes. He just wants chaos and profit. If he finds us before we can sell these documents, he'll kill us both and burn everything just to watch the world tear itself apart. Cole had met men like that before, the kind who loved war for its own sake, who thrived in the spaces where order collapsed. They were worse than soldiers or rebels because they had no loyalty to anything except their own amusement. "Then we'd better move fast," he said. They left the canyon together, two predators who temporarily aligned their interests. Above them, buzzards continued their slow circles, patient and eternal. The trading post sat in a shallow valley where three territories met, a no-man's land claimed by no government and controlled only by the man who ran the general store and cantina. His name was Tomas Rivera, and he'd gotten rich by selling supplies to every faction without asking questions. Bullets, beans, whiskey, information. Tomas traded in all of it with the cheerful amorality of a man who understood that war was business. Cole and Elena arrived after dark, their horses lathered with sweat from the hard ride. The post was a collection of adobe buildings arranged around a central courtyard where a few lonely lanterns cast pools of yellow light. Armed men lounged in the shadows, deserters, smugglers, scouts from a dozen different armies. All of them watched the newcomers with the flat, measuring stares of predators sizing up potential threats. "Friendly place," Elena murmured. "As friendly as anywhere else that doesn't shoot strangers on sight," Cole replied. They dismounted and led their horses to the stable, where a teenage boy with suspicious eyes took the reins. Cole pressed a silver coin into his palm. "Feed them, water them, and if anyone asks who we are, you didn't see us." The boy nodded and vanished into the darkness. The cantina was thick with smoke and noise. Men clustered around tables playing cards, arguing in 3 languages, conducting the kind of business that never saw daylight. Behind the bar, Tomas Rivera polished glasses with a stained rag, his round face perpetually cheerful despite the violence that simmered just beneath the surface of every transaction. He looked up as Cole and Elena entered, his expression shifting through recognition, calculation, and finally settling on professional welcome. "Senor Mercer," he said warmly, "it's been too long, and you've brought a guest." "Tomas." Cole approached the bar. "We need a room, quiet, secure." Of course," Tomas glanced at Elena, curiosity sparking in his eyes. Though I should warn you, General Salazar's men were here yesterday, asking about an American, offering gold for information. What did you tell them? Nothing. Naturally, your business is your business. Tomas set down 2 glasses and poured amber liquid from an unlabeled bottle. But others might be less discreet. If the general wants you found, he'll find you. Elena leaned against the bar, her posture relaxed, but her eyes constantly scanning the room. We're not staying long, just need a place to rest and make a few contacts. Contacts? Tomas's smile widened. What kind of contacts? The kind who pay well for information, Cole said carefully. Understanding dawned in Tomas's expression. Ah, you're selling. Well, you've come to the right place. I know buyers. Imperial agents, revolutionary financiers, arms dealers who'd pay fortunes for the right intelligence. He lowered his voice. But you should know, there's a complication. There always is, Elena said. A man arrived 3 days ago. European. Very wealthy, very dangerous. He's been asking questions about missing documents from a military convoy. Tomas paused. He calls himself Duke Viktor Dragunov. Cole felt Elena stiffen beside him. He's here? She asked sharply. Upstairs, room at the end of the hall. Tomas refilled their glasses. He's been waiting. Said he knew someone would bring him what he's looking for. Said it was inevitable. Cole exchanged a glance with Elena. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to get as far from this place as possible. But Dragunov was already here, already waiting. Running would only delay the confrontation. Is he alone? Cole asked. He travels with 2 bodyguards, Cossacks, I think. Very loyal, very lethal. Tomas shrugged. My advice? Don't go looking for trouble with the Duke. Men who cross him tend to disappear. Elena drained her glass in one swallow. We need to see him. Are you insane? Cole hissed. We don't have a choice. If Dragunov knows we're here, we can't hide. Better to confront him directly, find out what he wants. Her eyes were hard as flint. Besides, if he wanted us dead, we'd already be dead. He wants to negotiate. Cole didn't like it, but he recognized the logic. In a game of predators, showing fear was fatal. Fine, he said, but we go armed, and we don't give him anything unless the price is right. Tomas led them upstairs, his footsteps creaking on old wood. The hallway was narrow and dark, lit only by a single candle in a tin sconce. At the far end, a door stood slightly ajar, lamplight spilling through the crack. Tomas knocked twice, then retreated quickly, his cheerful mask slipping for just a moment to reveal genuine fear. Come in, called a voice from inside, cultured, amused, speaking English with a Slavic accent that turned consonants into weapons. I've been expecting you. Cole pushed the door open. The room beyond was surprisingly elegant for a frontier trading post. Carpets covered the rough floor, and a real oil lamp, not tallow, but refined oil, cast warm light over furniture that looked like it had been transported from some European drawing room. Seated at a small table, shuffling a deck of cards with the fluid grace of a professional gambler, was Duke Viktor Dragunov. He was younger than Cole had expected, mid-30s, with sharp Slavic features, pale eyes that glittered with intelligence and madness in equal measure, and a smile that suggested he found the entire world endlessly entertaining. He wore fine clothes, wool trousers, a silk shirt, a vest embroidered with gold thread, all immaculate despite the dust and violence of the borderlands. 2 men stood behind him, exactly as Tomas had described. Cossacks. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of stillness that came from absolute confidence in their ability to kill. Mr. Mercer, Victor said, gesturing to empty chairs. And Sister Elena, please sit. We have much to discuss. Cole remained standing, his hand near his revolver. How do you know who we are? I make it my business to know everyone involved in interesting games. Victor dealt 3 cards face up on the table, King, Queen, Jack. You're the mercenary who thinks he's hunting jewels. She's the former nun who thinks she's preventing a war. And I'm the man who knows what you're both really carrying. Elena sat, her movements controlled. The documents. Precisely. Victor's smile widened. Maps, troop movements, supply routes, weapons caches, the kind of information that could change the balance of power in this entire region. Salazar wants it. The Imperial forces want it. The arms dealers want it. Everyone wants it. He leaned forward. Except I already have it. Cole's blood went cold. Bullshit. Victor snapped his fingers. One of the Cossacks stepped forward and placed a leather satchel on the table. Victor opened it, revealing documents identical to the ones Elena carried. Copies, Elena said, but her voice wavered. Originals, Victor corrected. The documents you're carrying, sister, are very convincing forgeries, created by General Salazar to flush out anyone trying to steal his actual intelligence network. Congratulations, you've been playing with bait. The room seemed to tilt. Cole looked at Elena, saw the realization crashing over her features. They'd been played, used. Every step they'd taken had been anticipated, manipulated. Why tell us? Elena asked quietly. Because I'm offering you a choice. Victor gathered the cards and began shuffling again, the rhythmic whisper of paper filling the silence. You can walk away now, with nothing, and spend the rest of your short lives running from Salazar's vengeance. Or you can work for me. Work for you how? Cole's voice was ice. There's going to be an arms deal 5 days from now, a shipment of American weapons, repeating rifles, Gatling guns, ammunition, being sold to the highest bidder. Revolutionaries, imperial forces, and independent warlords will all be there, competing for firepower that could decide the next year of fighting. Victor's pale eyes gleamed. I'm going to steal those weapons, and you're going to help me. Why would we help you? Elena asked. Because if you do, I'll give you what you actually came here for. Real jewels, real gold, enough to buy new lives somewhere far from this bloodbath. Victor laid down a card, the ace of spades. And because if you refuse, I'll tell General Salazar exactly where to find his wayward American mercenary and his traitorous nun. Cole's hand moved toward his revolver, but the Cossacks were faster. Both had rifles aimed at his chest before his fingers even touched metal. Victor tisked softly. Violence won't solve this, Mr. Mercer. You're good, but not that good. The question is whether you're smart enough to recognize opportunity when it's offered. The silence stretched. Cole's mind raced through options, finding no good ones. They'd walked into a trap so elegant they hadn't even seen the jaws closing. Viktor Dragunov had outplayed them before the game even began. What exactly would this job entail? Elena asked carefully. Victor's smile returned, radiant and terrible. Deception, theft, betrayal, violence. He spread his hands. All the things you're already good at. You'll pose as buyers at the arms deal, gather intelligence on security and bidders, then help me execute the theft during the auction itself. And after? After, you disappear with your share of the profits, and I disappear with weapons worth more than this entire territory. Victor stood, extending his hand. Do we have a deal? Cole looked at Elena. Her face was unreadable, but he could see the calculations behind her eyes. She'd already decided. Survival trumped pride. He turned back to Victor, and against every instinct, shook the Duke's hand. We have a deal, Cole said. Victor's grip was dry and strong. Excellent. Welcome to the real game, Mr. Mercer. I promise. It will be far more entertaining than chasing fake jewels through the desert. As Cole and Elena left the room, escorted by one of the silent Cossacks to their own quarters, Cole couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just sold his soul. Not to the devil, devils were predictable, but to something worse. A man who played games with human lives and found it amusing. What? Morning came harsh and bright. Cole woke to find Elena already dressed, standing at the window and staring out at the dusty courtyard below. She'd braided her hair back severely and strapped a knife to her belt, small concessions to the violence that was their new reality. Couldn't sleep? Cole asked, sitting up and reaching for his boots. I kept thinking about what we're doing. She didn't turn from the window. We're helping a madman steal weapons that will be used to kill thousands of people. For money. You got a better plan? No. Her voice was flat. That's what keeps me awake. Cole understood. He'd crossed moral lines before. Everyone who survived in the borderlands did. But this felt different, larger. They weren't just taking someone's gold or settling a vendetta. They were actively shaping the course of a war. "We could run," he said, knowing even as he spoke that it was pointless. Elena finally turned to face him. "To where?" "Dragunova knows our faces, our names, probably our histories. Salazar wants us dead. Every faction in this region will be hunting the people who stole military intelligence." She shook her head. "The only way out is through." A knock at the door interrupted them. One of Victor's Cossacks entered without waiting for permission, his rifle slung casually over one shoulder. "Duke wants you," he said in heavily accented English. "Downstairs, now." They found Victor in the cantina, eating a breakfast that looked impossibly refined for the setting. Fresh eggs, bread that wasn't hardtack, real coffee that filled the room with rich aroma. He looked up as they approached, dabbing his lips with a cloth napkin. "Good morning," he said cheerfully. "I trust you slept well?" "No?" "A conscience, such an inconvenient burden." He gestured to empty chairs. "Sit. Eat. We have planning to do." Cole poured himself coffee, the first decent cup he'd had in months, and waited. Victor spread a map across the table, weighing down the corners with empty glasses. "The arms deal is happening here." He tapped a location marked with an X. "Old Mission Church, 30 miles northeast. Abandoned for years, but the stone walls make it defensible, and it's far enough from any garrison to avoid Imperial patrols." "Who's selling?" Elena asked. "American gun runners. Former military quartermaster and his associates who decided to go into business for themselves. They're bringing 50 repeating rifles, 3 Gatling guns, and enough ammunition to sustain a regiment for 6 months. Victor's eyes gleamed. "Conservative estimate, the weapons are worth $200,000. But in a war zone. Priceless." Cole whistled softly. That kind of firepower could change everything. "Who's buying?" 3 main bidders. First, General Salazar's Revolutionary Army. He's desperate for modern weapons to offset the Imperial forces' numerical advantage. Second, Colonel Reynaldo Cortez, commander of the Imperial garrison at San Rafael. He wants the weapons to crush the revolution before it spreads. Third, a consortium of independent warlords who control the mining territories. They want to stay independent of both empire and revolution. "And you're going to steal from all of them," Elena said. "Exactly." Victor's smile was pure predatory joy. "While they're busy bidding against each other, you two will be gathering intelligence on their security, their backup plans, their weaknesses. Then, when the auction reaches its climax, we strike." "How?" Cole asked. "That's the beautiful part. We're not going to steal the weapons through force. We're going to steal them through betrayal." Victor leaned back, fingers steepled. "You're going to convince the sellers that one of the bidders is planning to rob them. Paranoia will do the rest. They'll turn on each other, and in the chaos, we'll walk away with everything." It was insane. It was brilliant and insane. "What's our cover?" Elena asked. "You're representatives of a 4th bidder, a mysterious patron from across the Atlantic who's interested in destabilizing the region for his own purposes," which, ironically, is partially true. Victor slid 2 leather documents across the table. "New identities, new papers. Study them. Become them. If anyone suspects you're working for me, we all die." Cole opened his folder. The documents were flawless. Travel papers, letters of credit, even a photograph of him in formal attire that looked like it had been taken years ago. Victor's resources went deeper than he'd realized. "One more thing," Victor said, his tone shifting to something darker. "General Salazar will be at the auction personally. He's taking the bidding seriously enough to risk showing his face outside his stronghold. If he recognizes you, Mr. Mercer, he'll have you killed on sight." "I'll wear a disguise. See that you do." Victor stood. The meeting apparently concluded. "We leave tomorrow at dawn, travel separately. You'll go as my advance scouts. I'll arrive with my merchandise later. Don't fail me. I dislike loose ends, and I'm very efficient at tying them up." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Chet. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Cole shaved his beard, changed his clothes, adopted the posture and mannerisms of a European merchant's agent. Elena transformed herself with equal skill, becoming someone harder, colder, a woman who'd seen enough of the world to trust nothing. They rode northeast under a merciless sun, following cart tracks that wound through country that grew progressively more dangerous. This was contested territory, where imperial patrols and revolutionary ambushes happened daily. They passed burned homesteads and shallow graves marked with crude crosses. The land itself seemed exhausted by violence. The old mission appeared on the horizon late in the afternoon of the second day, a skeleton of stone walls and collapsed roof beams rising from the desert like broken teeth. It had been built 2 centuries ago by missionaries with dreams of saving souls. Now it would host an auction for instruments of death. They were stopped a mile from the mission by armed men on horseback, professional soldiers, not bandits. The leader, a sergeant with a scarred face and watchful eyes, demanded their papers. Cole handed over the forged documents with the bored confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times. The sergeant studied them, then handed them back. "You're early. Auction doesn't start until tomorrow evening." "Our patron values punctuality," Elena said coolly. "We're here to assess the merchandise and ensure it meets specifications." The sergeant shrugged. "Your funeral. Camp's that way. Don't start any fights, don't steal anything, and don't go anywhere you're not invited. Break those rules and we'll shoot you." "Understood," Cole said. They rode past the checkpoint into organized chaos. The mission grounds had been transformed into a temporary military camp. Tents clustered around the stone walls, campfires sent smoke into the evening sky, and men from a dozen different factions eyed each other with barely concealed hostility. Imperial soldiers in crisp uniforms, revolutionary fighters in mismatched gear, mercenaries and deserters. All of them armed, all of them tense. A powder keg waiting for a spark. Cole and Elena made camp away from the main clusters, setting up a small tent and starting a modest fire. They spoke little, both of them focused on watching, learning, identifying the key players. General Salazar arrived at sunset, traveling with 20 armed guards and an air of barely contained fury. He was exactly as Cole remembered, mid-40s, with a face like carved granite and eyes that had seen too much death to value life. A revolutionary who'd started with ideals and ended with just another hunger for power. Cole kept his hat low and his face turned away as Salazar's entourage passed. Colonel Cortez arrived an hour later, representing the Imperial forces. He was older, more polished, with the bearing of a career officer who'd climbed through competence and politics in equal measure. His troops were better equipped, better disciplined, but there were fewer of them. Quality versus quantity. The Warlord Consortium sent 3 representatives, hard men with the kind of wealth that came from controlling resources everyone needed. They traveled light, but carried themselves with the confidence of people who knew they could buy anything, including loyalty. As darkness fell, Elena leaned close to Cole. "This is going to explode. You can feel it." She was right. The tension was suffocating. Too many armed men, too much at stake, too little trust. One wrong word, one perceived slight, and this entire place would erupt into violence, which, Cole realized, was exactly what Victor wanted. Chaos was the Duke's natural element. Viktor Dragunov arrived at midnight like a showman making an entrance. His convoy rolled into camp with torches blazing, accompanied by a brass band playing some jaunty European march that sounded obscene in this place of dust and death. The 2 Cossacks rode point, rifles ready, but Victor himself sat in an open carriage, waving to the assembled crowd like a politician courting votes. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. The Duke had arrived, and the real game was about to begin. He stepped down from the carriage wearing a crimson coat that must have cost more than most of these men earned in a year, and his smile suggested he was deeply, genuinely delighted to be here. "Gentlemen," he called out in Spanish, his accent atrocious but enthusiastic, "what a magnificent gathering! Buyers, sellers, soldiers, thieves, everyone who makes this beautiful, terrible world go round. I am honored to join you." General Salazar stood from his fire, his expression murderous. "Who the hell are you?" "Duke Viktor Dragunov, at your service." Victor executed a mocking bow. "Representing interests that prefer to remain unnamed. I'm here to bid on your delightful instruments of war. I do hope there will be enough for everyone." "This auction is for serious buyers," Colonel Cortez said coldly, "not European parasites playing at adventure." Victor's smile never wavered. "I assure you, Colonel, my gold is as serious as anyone's. More so, perhaps. I've come a very long way for this opportunity." It would be terribly rude to exclude me simply because I find joy in what others consider grim business. The American gun runners appeared from inside the mission, 3 men in dusty suits who moved with the careful neutrality of people trying not to take sides. Their leader, a former quartermaster named Jackson Hayes, stepped forward. "Your money's good. Anyone's money's good," Hayes said flatly. "We sell to the highest bidder. No politics, no questions." That was the deal. Victor clasped his hands together. "Wonderful. Then let us all be friends until the bidding begins. After that, of course, we'll be mortal enemies. But until then, friendship." He produced a bottle of vodka from his coat and took a long drink, then offered it to the nearest soldier, one of Salazar's men, who stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Cole watched from across the camp, both fascinated and horrified. Victor was playing a role, deliberately making himself seem like a wealthy fool, someone to dismiss. But beneath the performance, those pale eyes were calculating, measuring, planning. The Duke was setting the stage for tomorrow's betrayal, and Cole and Elena were his unwitting actors. As the camp settled into uneasy rest, Cole found Elena sharpening her knife by their dying fire. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "everything changes. For better or worse. Does it matter?" She tested the blade's edge against her thumb. "We're committed now. The only way out is through blood." Cole had no argument for that. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled. A lonely, desperate sound that seemed to echo from the bones of the earth itself. Dawn broke over the mission like a threat. Cole woke to the sound of men preparing for war, the metallic click of rifles being checked, the low murmur of strategy being debated, the nervous energy that preceded violence. He lay still for a moment, listening to the camp come alive around him, knowing that by nightfall, many of these voices would be silenced forever. Elena was already awake, sitting cross-legged outside their tent and watching the activity with the focused attention of a hunter studying prey. She'd changed into darker clothes, practical garments that wouldn't show blood. Her knife was strapped to her thigh where it could be drawn quickly. "The sellers moved the weapons into the mission before sunrise," she said without looking at him. 3 wagons, heavily guarded. Hayes isn't taking chances." Cole emerged from the tent, stretching muscles stiff from sleeping on hard ground. The morning air was already warm, promising another day of brutal heat. "How many guards?" 12 that I counted, all armed with repeating rifles, probably keeping samples for themselves. Elena stood, dusting off her trousers. "The auction starts at noon. Victor wants us inside an hour early to assess security and identify exit routes." "Where is he?" "Holding court." Elena nodded toward the center of camp where a crowd had gathered. "Playing the fool again." They walked over to find Victor seated on a camp chair, surrounded by soldiers and mercenaries, regaling them with some outrageous story about hunting tigers in Siberia. He spoke with grand gestures, his voice carrying across the camp, occasionally pausing to translate for those who didn't speak English. The men around him laughed, drawn in by his charisma despite themselves. It was a performance, Cole realized, every word calculated to make Victor seem harmless, entertaining, someone to underestimate, the wealthy eccentric who treated war like sport. But Cole noticed how Victor's eyes never stopped moving, cataloging faces, measuring reactions, identifying who could be useful and who would need to be eliminated, a predator wearing a jester's mask. Victor caught sight of Cole and Elena and waved them over with theatrical enthusiasm. "Ah, my associates! Come, join us. I was just telling these fine gentlemen about the time I nearly lost my hand to a Manchurian bear." "Fascinating," Elena said dryly, "but we should review the inventory before the auction." "Always so serious." Victor stood, stretching languidly. "Very well. Business before pleasure." He turned to his audience with an apologetic shrug. "Duty calls, my friends. We'll continue this later, yes? I still haven't told you about the Countess and the stolen diamonds." The soldiers groaned good-naturedly as Victor walked away, flanked by Cole and Elena. Once they were out of earshot, his entire demeanor shifted. The playful mask dropped, revealing something colder underneath. "Status?" he asked quietly. 12 guards on the weapons, Cole reported. "Hayes is paranoid, won't let anyone near the merchandise until the bidding starts." "Good. Paranoia makes people predictable." Victor glanced toward the mission. "The buyers?" Elena pulled a folded paper from her pocket. notes she'd made during the night. Salazar brought 20 men, all veterans, well armed but nervous. They're expecting trouble. Cortez has 15 imperial soldiers, professional and disciplined. The warlord representatives have small personal guards but significant financial resources. And everyone hates everyone else, Victor said with satisfaction. Perfect conditions for what I have planned. He stopped walking and turned to face them. Here's how this will work. During the auction, you'll be positioned near the exits. When I give the signal, and you'll know it when you see it, you'll start spreading a rumor. What rumor? Cole asked. That one of the bidders is planning to rob the sellers after the auction concludes. Whisper it to the guards, the soldiers, anyone who'll listen. Let paranoia do the rest. Victor's smile was sharp as broken glass. These men are already on edge. Push them just a little further, and they'll tear each other apart. And while they're fighting? Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. My Cossacks and I will secure the weapons and disappear into the chaos. By the time anyone realizes what happened, we'll be miles away with enough firepower to outfit a small army. Victor adjusted his coat. Simple, elegant, utterly ruthless. What about our payment? Cole pressed. Patience. Once the weapons are secured and sold to my actual buyer, who is definitely not anyone here, you'll receive your share, 45% as agreed. Enough gold to buy new lives far from this wretched place. Victor's expression softened slightly, though his eyes remained cold. I keep my promises, Mr. Mercer. Unlike General Salazar. The mention of Salazar sent a chill down Cole's spine. The revolutionary leader was somewhere in this camp, probably fantasizing about what he'd do to the American mercenary who'd betrayed him. If their paths crossed, if Salazar recognized him despite the disguise. Stay focused, Elena murmured, reading his tension. We play our parts, we survive, we get paid. Nothing else matters. She was right. Cole had survived this long by keeping his goals simple. Survival first, profit second. Everything else was noise. They spent the next hour moving through the camp, memorizing faces, noting weapon placements, identifying potential threats. The atmosphere grew heavier as noon approached. Conversations died. Men checked their weapons with the obsessive attention of those who expected to use them soon. At 11:30, Jackson Hayes emerged from the mission and fired a pistol into the air. The sharp crack silenced the camp instantly. Auction starts in 30 minutes, he shouted. Bidders and their representatives only. Everyone else stays outside. Anyone tries to cause trouble, we shoot first and don't bother with questions. Clear? A rumble of acknowledgement rolled through the crowd. Hayes pointed to the mission entrance. Form a line. We'll check everyone for weapons. You can bring sidearms, nothing else. Guards stay outside. This caused immediate protest. Salazar's lieutenant stepped forward, his hand on his rifle. The general doesn't go anywhere unarmed. Then the general doesn't come inside, Hayes said flatly. These are the rules. Don't like them? Leave. For a moment, violence hung in the air like the scent of cordite. Then Salazar himself appeared, raising a hand to silence his men. It's acceptable. I have nothing to fear from merchants and cowards. The insult was directed at Colonel Cortez, who stiffened but said nothing. Salazar unbuckled his gun belt and handed it to his lieutenant. Wait here. If I'm not out in 2 hours, kill everyone. The lieutenant grinned. With pleasure, General. Cole and Elena joined the line forming outside the mission entrance. Victor was ahead of them, chatting amiably with one of the warlord representatives about the quality of French wine. Behind them, Cortez stood rigid, his jaw tight with barely suppressed fury at being forced to disarm. The search was thorough. Hayes's men patted down each person, confiscated rifles and fighting knives, checked for hidden weapons with practiced efficiency. When it was Cole's turn, the guard's hands found the revolver at his hip and the knife in his boot. Those stay, the guard said, depositing both weapons in a wooden crate. Cole nodded and moved into the mission. The interior had been transformed. The collapsed roof had been partially repaired with canvas tarps that filtered sunlight into diffuse golden beams. Wooden benches faced a raised platform where 3 covered wagons sat, their contents hidden beneath heavy canvas. Armed guards ringed the space, their rifles held with casual competence. Hayes stood on the platform, flanked by his 2 partners, a scarred former sergeant named Brooks and a thin accountant type called Winters, who handled the financial arrangements. Behind them, barely visible in the shadows, were the real weapons. Wooden crates stenciled with U.S. Army markings, metal cases that likely contained the Gatling guns, and ammunition boxes stacked like building blocks. Enough death to sustain a war for months. Cole and Elena took positions near the side exit, as Victor had instructed. From here, they could see the entire room, the buyers clustering into hostile groups, the guards maintaining careful distance from everyone, the sellers preparing to extract maximum profit from mutual desperation. Victor settled into a front row seat, producing a silver flask and taking a drink with obvious enjoyment. Several people stared at him with open contempt, which he ignored completely. At precisely noon, Hayes stepped forward and raised his hands for silence. "Gentlemen, welcome. You all know why we're here. What I'm selling is simple. 50 Winchester Model 1873 repeating rifles, 3 Colt Browning M 1895 Gatling guns, and enough .44-40 ammunition to keep you shooting for 6 months." He pulled the canvas off the nearest wagon, revealing rifles packed in neat rows, their metal gleaming. "Every weapon is new, direct from the factory. No defects, no problems. You buy them, you own them. No questions asked." Salazar leaned forward, his eyes hungry. "What's your price?" "We start bidding at $100,000. Cash or equivalent gold. Bids increase by $5,000 minimum." Hayes' expression was granite. "Payment in full before the weapons leave this building. No credit, no promises, no negotiations after the sale concludes." Cortez stood, his uniform immaculate despite the dust. "How do we know these weapons are authentic? That they'll actually function in combat conditions?" "Good question." Hayes nodded to Brooks, who selected a rifle at random, loaded it with practice speed, and fired 6 shots into the far wall. The reports were deafening in the enclosed space, making several people flinch. Brooks then demonstrated the Gatling gun, cranking off a burst that chewed through a wooden beam like it was paper. The demonstration left no doubt. These weapons were real, functional, and devastating. "Satisfied?" Hayes asked. Cortez sat down slowly, his face pale. He'd just watched a demonstration of firepower that could shred his garrison in minutes. "Then let's begin," Hayes said. "Starting bid. $100,000. Who wants to start?" For a moment no one spoke. The weight of the decision hung over them all. Committing to this auction meant committing to escalation, to a level of violence that would make everything that came before seem like a skirmish. Then Salazar spoke. 100,000. 105, Cortez countered immediately. 110, said the lead warlord representative, a man called Vargas, and the auction was underway. The bidding climbed quickly. 120, 130, 150. Each increase tightened the tension in the room. Men shifted, hands moving unconsciously toward weapons that were no longer there. The guards' fingers tightened on their triggers. At 175,000, Victor raised his hand languidly. 200,000. The room went silent. Hayes blinked. "Did you say 200,000? "I did," Victor smiled. "In gold. To be delivered within the hour if my bid is accepted." Salazar stood abruptly, his chair scraping against stone. "This is a farce. You're not a legitimate buyer. You're some European parasite playing games." "My gold is as real as your revolution, General." Victor's tone remained pleasant, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Perhaps more so. After all, gold doesn't require belief to have value. 205,000, Vargas called out, trying to break the confrontation. 250,000, Victor responded without hesitation. Cortez slammed his hand on the bench. "This is insane. You're driving the price beyond reason." "Is there a reason to war, Colonel?" Victor stood, addressing the entire room. "You're all here to buy instruments of death. I'm simply willing to pay more for them than you are. If that offends your sense of martial dignity, perhaps you should have brought more money." Cole saw it happening, the careful balance of the auction crumbling. Victor was deliberately antagonizing everyone, pushing them toward the edge. This wasn't about winning the bid. It was about creating chaos. Salazar took a step toward Victor, his fists clenched. "You think this is a game? People are dying out there. Families are being destroyed. This is about freedom, about justice. This is about power," Victor interrupted, his voice suddenly cold and cutting. "Nothing more, nothing less. You rapid and noble words, General, but at the end of the day you want these weapons for the same reason the Colonel does. To kill your enemies more efficiently. Don't pretend otherwise. It's insulting." The room erupted. Salazar's men surged forward, only to be blocked by Hayes's guards. Cortez's officers stood, hands moving toward empty holsters. The warlord representatives backed toward the exits, recognizing the smell of imminent violence. Hayes fired his pistol into the air again. "Everyone sit down, now, or the auction ends and nobody gets anything." Slowly, grudgingly, order was restored. But the damage was done. Everyone was primed for violence, waiting for an excuse. Which was exactly when Victor gave Cole the signal, a barely perceptible nod. Cole moved casually toward the nearest guard, a young man who looked barely old enough to shave. "Heard something troubling," Cole said quietly in Spanish, his accent carefully neutral. "One of the bidders is planning to rob Hayes after the auction, going to wait until the weapons are loaded, then take everything." The guard's eyes widened. "Who?" "Don't know for certain, but I'd watch the revolutionary contingent. They don't have enough gold for a legitimate bid." Cole moved away before the guard could ask more questions, leaving the seed planted. Across the room, Elena was doing the same, whispering to a different guard, suggesting that the Imperial forces were planning treachery. The guards began talking among themselves, their body language shifting from bored professionalism to active alertness. They started watching the bidders more closely, rifles held at ready positions rather than casual carries. Hayes noticed the change. "What's going on?" he demanded of his men. "Sir, we're hearing rumors." "What rumors?" "That someone's planning to rob us after the sale." Hayes's face hardened. He scanned the room, seeing the hostile factions, the barely suppressed violence, the powder keg his auction had become. "Brooks, Winters, double the guard on the weapons. Nobody moves anything until I say so." But it was too late. The paranoia was spreading like wildfire. Salazar's lieutenant appeared in the doorway, violating the no guards rule. "General, we have reports that Imperial forces are moving into position around the mission. Looks like they're preparing an ambush." Cortez shot to his feet. "That's a lie. My men are holding defensive positions, nothing more." "Defensive?" Salazar laughed bitterly. "You're surrounding us." "Because your revolutionaries have been probing our lines all morning." The accusations flew back and forth, each side convinced the other was preparing betrayal. Hayes tried to restore order, but his voice was lost in the chaos. And that's when the first shot rang out from outside the mission. It was impossible to know who fired or why. Maybe a nervous soldier seeing shadows. Maybe a deliberate provocation. It didn't matter. The sound of gunfire ignited everything. Men dove for cover. The guards swung their rifles toward the bidders, unsure who the threat was. Salazar's forces outside the mission opened fire on Cortez's troops, who returned fire instantly. The warlord representatives ran for the exits, desperate to escape the slaughter. Victor remained seated through it all, his expression one of pure delight. "And so it begins," he said to no one in particular. Cole grabbed Elena's arm. "Time to go." They ran for the side exit as bullets began punching through the canvas roof. Behind them, Hayes was screaming orders that no one followed. Brooks went down, clutching his leg. The auction had become a battlefield in seconds. Outside, the mission grounds were chaos incarnate. 3 separate factions were shooting at each other with no clear lines of engagement. Men fell, screaming or silent. Horses bolted, trampling tents. Smoke from gunfire created a fog that made it impossible to identify friend from foe. Perfect conditions for Victor's theft. Cole and Elena pressed against the mission wall, trying to orient themselves. Across the compound, they could see Victor's 2 Cossacks moving with mechanical efficiency toward the weapons cache. They weren't running, weren't panicking, just walking through the carnage like death itself, shooting anyone who got in their way. "We need to get to the horses," Elena shouted over the gunfire. "Not yet. Victor's plan—" "Forget Victor's plan. This whole place is about to collapse. We take our chance now, or we die here." She was right. The mission was surrounded by 3 armies shooting at each other. There was no way Victor could extract those weapons through this. The plan had worked too well. Instead of controlled chaos, he'd created an apocalypse. They ran toward the stable area, keeping low, using tents and wagons for cover. A stray bullet took off Cole's hat. Another buried itself in the ground, inches from Elena's foot. They dove behind an overturned wagon just as a Gatling gun opened up somewhere, its distinctive mechanical roar cutting through the other sounds of battle. "Is that—" Elena started. "Victor must have gotten to the weapons." Cole risked a glance over the wagon. Through the smoke, he could see one of the Cossacks manning a Gatling gun, cutting down anyone who approached the mission entrance. The other Cossack was already loading rifles into a wagon, working with impossible calm despite the hell erupting around him. And there was Victor himself standing in the middle of the carnage, directing his men like a conductor leading an orchestra. Bullets seemed to miss him by inches, but he never flinched, never hurried. "He's going to get himself killed," Elena said. "He's going to get us all killed," Cole corrected. A group of Salazar's men charged the mission, trying to secure the weapons for themselves. The Gatling gun cut them down like wheat before a scythe. The survivors broke and ran, only to be caught in crossfire from Cortez's troops. The slaughter was indiscriminate, absolute. Cole made a decision. "We're leaving, now. Forget the money, forget Victor, forget all of it. We take horses and we ride until we're out of this territory." Elena looked at him, smoke and blood streaking her face. "And spend the rest of our lives running from Salazar, Cortez, and Victor? That's not survival. That's just slow death." "You have a better idea?" "Yes." Her eyes were hard as flint. "We finish what we started. We help Victor escape with those weapons, we take our payment, and then we disappear before anyone realizes what happened." "That's insane. So is everything else." She stood, checking the revolver she'd somehow reclaimed during the chaos. "We're already damned, Cole. Might as well profit from it." He stared at her for a long moment, seeing the transformation that had occurred. The former nun who'd wanted to prevent a war had become someone willing to fuel one for personal gain. This place had changed her, corrupted her, or maybe it had just revealed who she'd always been underneath the habit and prayers. Cole retrieved his own weapons from a dead guard and nodded. "Fine. But if this goes wrong, we kill Victor ourselves and take the weapons." Agreed. They moved back toward the mission, fighting through the edges of the battle. The Gatling gun had stopped, either out of ammunition or jammed. Salazar's forces were regrouping for another assault, while Cortez's troops held defensive positions around the perimeter. Victor saw them approaching and waved cheerfully, as if they were meeting for tea rather than in the middle of a massacre. "Excellent timing. I need you to provide covering fire while we finish loading." "The whole territory is going to descend on this place," Cole said. "We need to move now." "Almost ready." Victor gestured to the wagon, now laden with weapons crates. "Just a few more items, and we can depart this charming venue." An explosion rocked the mission. Someone had thrown dynamite. Stone fragments flew like shrapnel, cutting down men on both sides. Part of the wall collapsed, crushing several soldiers beneath tons of rubble. "We're out of time," Elena screamed. Victor's mask of amusement finally cracked. "Very well. Everyone in the wagon, we're leaving." The two Cossacks vaulted into the driver's seat while Victor, Cole, and Elena scrambled into the back among the weapons crates. The wagon lurched forward, horses panicking at the smell of blood and smoke. They burst through the mission gate at full gallop, trampling tents and scattering soldiers. Bullets chased them, punching through the wagon's wooden sides. One of the Cossacks grunted as a round caught his shoulder, but he kept driving, whipping the horses into greater speed. Behind them, the battle continued. Salazar's forces and Cortez's troops so focused on destroying each other, they barely noticed the wagon escaping with the prize they'd been fighting over. They crashed through the final perimeter and hit open ground, the wagon bouncing violently over rough terrain. Cole held on, his knuckles white, watching the mission shrink behind them as smoke rose into the cloudless sky. "Where are we going?" he shouted over the thunder of hooves. Victor pulled a map from his coat. "There's a river crossing 15 miles north. My actual buyer is waiting there with payment. We deliver the weapons, collect our money, and part ways." "Who's the buyer?" "Does it matter?" Victor's smile returned, sharp and dangerous. "Someone with enough gold to make all of this worthwhile. Someone who understands that in war, the real winners are those who sell the means of destruction rather than those who use it." Elena braced herself as the wagon hit a deep rut. "And you trust this buyer not to just kill us and take the weapons?" Trust is such a quaint concept. Victor checked his pistol, ensuring it was loaded. I have insurance. If I don't make contact by sunset, certain information about this buyer's operations gets delivered to their competitors. Mutually assured destruction. It's the only honest relationship in this world. The wagon raced across the desert, leaving a dust trail visible for miles. Behind them, somewhere in that pall of smoke and carnage, men were dying for a prize that was already gone. Salazar would blame Cortez. Cortez would blame Salazar. By the time either realized they'd been played, Victor would be across the border with enough money to fund a dozen new schemes. It was brilliant, ruthless, absolutely without conscience. Cole found himself both disgusted and impressed. They rode hard for 2 hours, pushing the horses to the edge of collapse. The landscape changed gradually, desert giving way to scrubland, then to the first hints of water-fed vegetation. The river appeared on the horizon, a silver snake winding through brown earth, and waiting at the crossing, exactly as Victor had promised, was a small camp. 3 men stood beside a wagon loaded with metal strongboxes. They were well-armed, professional, with the kind of stillness that marked experienced killers. Behind them, additional guards watched the surrounding terrain with rifles ready. Victor called for the wagon to halt 50 yards from the camp. "Standard procedure," he explained. "We verify the payment, they verify the merchandise, then we complete the exchange. Everyone stays alive and wealthy." "Unless they decide to kill us anyway," Cole said. "Hence why you two will provide security during the transaction." Victor hopped down from the wagon, straightening his coat. "Try not to die. I'd hate to lose my investment in your services." He walked forward alone, approaching the buyer's representative, a severe-looking man in a suit too formal for the frontier. They spoke briefly, their voices not carrying. Then the representative snapped his fingers, and one of the strongboxes was opened. Even from this distance, Cole could see the gleam of gold, bars of it, stacked neatly. Enough to buy a ranch, a shipping company, a new life on a different continent. Enough to make every moral compromise, every betrayal, every drop of blood seem worthwhile. The representative gestured to the weapons wagon. Victor nodded and signaled to the Cossacks, who began unloading crates for inspection. It should have been simple. A clean transaction between criminals who understood the rules. But Cole's instincts, honed by years of surviving in places where trust was a death sentence, screamed that something was wrong. He caught Elena's eye and saw the same recognition. She'd positioned herself where she could see the entire camp, her hand near her revolver. The buyer's guards were too alert, too focused. They weren't watching for external threats. They were watching Victor's people. "This is a setup," Cole said quietly. "I know," Elena replied. "Question is, do we warn Victor or just run?" Before Cole could answer, the representative pulled a pistol and shot Victor's wounded Cossack in the head. The sound echoed across the river, crossing like a death knell. Everything exploded into violence for the second time that day. The Cossack's body hit the ground with a finality that seemed to stop time itself. For a frozen heartbeat, no one moved. The report of the pistol echoed across the water, bouncing off rocks and fading into terrible silence. Then the remaining Cossack, the one who'd been unloading weapons, moved with the speed of a striking snake, his rifle coming up even as he dove behind the wagon. The buyer's guards opened fire in a coordinated volley that spoke of military training and careful planning. Bullets tore through the air where the Cossack had been standing, punching holes in wooden crates and sending splinters flying like shrapnel. Victor dropped flat, rolling behind one of the strongboxes with remarkable agility for a man who'd been playing the fool for days. His hand emerged from his coat holding a pistol that looked too small for the situation, but fired with surprising authority, dropping one of the guards before the man could take cover. Cole grabbed Elena and pulled her behind their own wagon as return fire began in earnest. "So much for a clean transaction," he said, drawing his revolver. "We need to choose a side," Elena said, her voice remarkably steady despite the chaos. "Victor or the buyers?" "Victor has the weapons we helped steal. The buyers have the gold." Cole risked a glance around the wagon's edge. The representative who'd shot the Cossack was barking orders, directing his men to flank Victor's position. Professional. Organized. Probably former military, same as Hayes and his people. "Neither side gives a damn if we live or die." Then we create a third option. Elena checked her ammunition with practiced efficiency. We take both the weapons and the gold, and we leave everyone else bleeding in the dirt. Cole stared at her, seeing the transformation complete. The woman who'd once worn a nun's habit and spoken of preventing war had become something harder, colder, someone willing to kill for profit without hesitation. The Borderlands did that to people. Stripped away everything soft until only survival remained. "That's suicide," he said. "So is staying here." Elena's eyes were chips of amber ice. "Victor's outnumbered. The buyers will kill him, take the weapons, and then hunt us down because we're witnesses. Our only chance is to move now, while they're focused on each other." She was right, and Cole knew it. Loyalty was a luxury neither of them could afford. Victor had used them as pawns in his game. The buyers were murderers executing a pre-planned ambush. Everyone here deserved whatever fate the desert delivered. The surviving Cossack was providing covering fire with mechanical precision, his rifle barking steadily as he picked off targets. But he was one man against 8, and the buyers were advancing in a coordinated tactical movement that would overwhelm him within minutes. Victor seemed to recognize this as well. He fired twice more, forcing the representative to duck, then shouted across the killing ground, "Mr. Mercer, Sister Elena, I don't suppose you'd consider honoring our agreement." "Depends," Cole called back. "You planning to survive the next 5 minutes?" "I have a remarkable talent for survival." Victor's voice carried genuine amusement, despite the bullets chewing up the strongbox protecting him. "Though I admit the odds are less favorable than I'd prefer, perhaps we could negotiate a temporary alliance, pool our resources against these treacherous bastards?" The representative heard this and laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "No one's leaving here alive except my men. You brought the weapons, Duke, but you forgot the first rule of dealing with criminals. Never trust anyone." "How delightfully hypocritical," Victor shot back. "Coming from a man who just murdered someone during a business transaction. Where's your professional integrity?" "Buried with my conscience." The representative signaled his men to continue advancing. "Kill them all. Take everything." Cole made his decision. "Elena, can you drive a wagon?" "Better than you can." "Good. I'm going to give Victor and his Cossack covering fire. You get to that strongbox wagon and get it moving. Pick me up on your way past." "And Victor?" "If he's smart enough to jump on, he lives. If not, he dies here." Cole positioned himself at the wagon's corner, rifle ready. "We're not heroes. We're survivors. Remember that." Elena nodded and began working her way around the wagon's far side, staying low, using the terrain and smoke from gunfire as cover. Cole watched her go, part of him wondering if she'd just abandon him entirely and make a run for it alone. They'd known each other for days, not years. Trust was a commodity neither possessed in abundance. But then again, she needed him as much as he needed her. One person couldn't drive a wagon and fight off pursuers simultaneously. He sighted down his rifle at the nearest guard, a lean man with a bandolier who was advancing on Victor's position with professional caution. Cole led him by half a breath and squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked, the man went down clutching his leg, and suddenly all the buyer's attention swung toward this new threat. "Mercer, you magnificent bastard!" Victor's voice carried delight and relief in equal measure. "I knew you had a mercenary's honor." "I'm not doing this for honor," Cole muttered, working the lever action and firing again. Another guard dove for cover, his shot going wild. "I'm doing it for gold!" The Cossack recognized the shift in dynamics and adjusted his own fire, creating a crossfire pattern that forced the buyers to split their attention. It wasn't enough to win, but it bought precious seconds. Elena reached the buyer's wagon and vaulted into the driver's seat with the agility of someone who'd lived rough for longer than her refined accent suggested. She grabbed the reins, released the brake, and whipped the horses into motion with a sharp cry that carried over the gunfire. The wagon lurched forward, heavy with gold but gaining speed rapidly. The representative saw what was happening and screamed at his men to stop her, but they were pinned down by fire from 3 directions now. 2 tried to break cover and chase the wagon on foot. Cole shot one. The Cossack got the other. The wagon thundered past Cole's position, Elena fighting the reins as the panicked horses tried to bolt. "Move!" she screamed. Cole sprinted from cover, his lungs burning, legs pumping as bullets kicked up dust around his feet. He grabbed the wagon's side and hauled himself up with strength born of desperation, nearly losing his grip as the wagon hit a rut and bounced violently. Behind him, Victor was running for the weapons wagon, the Cossack providing covering fire as they executed a fighting retreat. Victor reached the driver's seat and grabbed the reins, but the Cossack wasn't going to make it. Too much distance, too many guns tracking his movement. Cole saw the calculation cross Victor's face in real time. The decision between loyalty and survival. Between saving a man who'd served him faithfully and escaping with his life and fortune. Victor chose survival. He whipped the horses forward, and the weapons wagon rolled away, leaving the Cossack standing alone in the middle of the killing ground. The man didn't scream, didn't curse. He just turned and fired methodically at the buyers, killing 2 more before their return fire cut him down. He died standing, his rifle still raised, defiant to the last breath. "Ruthless," Elena said quietly, watching Victor's wagon racing parallel to theirs. "Even for him." "We're all ruthless now," Cole said. "That's how we survive." The 2 wagons thundered across the scrubland, the river crossing falling away behind them as the surviving buyers scrambled to organize pursuit. But they'd lost half their force, and both wagons in the ambush turned disaster. By the time they found horses and gave chase, Cole and Elena and Victor would have miles of lead. Victor pulled his wagon alongside theirs, close enough that Cole could see the blood splattered across his crimson coat and the manic gleam in his pale eyes. "That went poorly," he shouted over the thunder of hooves and wheels. "You left your man to die," Cole shouted back. "He knew the risks. We all do." Victor's expression shifted to something harder. "Don't pretend you would have done differently, Mr. Mercer. You were ready to leave me as well. I saw it in your eyes." Cole had no answer for that because it was true. They'd all made the same calculation. The desert didn't reward sentiment. They rode for an hour at punishing speed, pushing the horses until foam flecked their mouths and their flanks heaved. Finally, Victor called for a halt in a narrow canyon that offered some concealment from the open terrain. The wagons stopped in a cloud of dust, and everyone dismounted on legs shaky from adrenaline and exhaustion. Cole's hands were still trembling slightly as he checked his ammunition. 6 rounds left. Elena had 7. Victor had a full cylinder plus a backup pistol. Not nearly enough if the buyers caught up with a larger force. "We need to split the cargo and separate," Elena said, always the practical one. 2 wagons are too visible. We'll be tracked within hours." Agreed. Victor leaned against his wagon, wiping blood, someone else's, from his face with a silk handkerchief. "I propose we divide everything equally. Weapons and gold, 50-50. "We had a deal," Cole reminded him. 45% for Elena and me. That deal was predicated on a successful sale to legitimate buyers, not a firefight that killed half the participants. Victor's smile was sharp. "I'd say the terms have changed considerably. Besides, you did save my life. That should count for something." Elena walked to the strongbox wagon and forced open one of the metal cases. Gold bars gleamed in the afternoon light, stacked with precision. She pulled one out, testing its weight, then tossed it to Victor. "Divide it, now, before someone else shows up to kill us all." For the next 30 minutes, they worked with the focused intensity of criminals dividing loot. Gold bars were counted and split. Rifles and ammunition were distributed between wagons. The Gatling guns presented a problem. Impossible to split, too valuable to leave behind. "We'll need to choose," Victor said, studying the weapons with a connoisseur's appreciation. "One wagon takes the Gatlings. The other takes extra rifles and ammunition to compensate." "Who decides?" Cole asked. "We draw lots. Winner takes the Gatlings." Victor produced a deck of cards from his coat, because of course he had playing cards in the middle of the desert. "High card wins." He shuffled with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent years in gambling halls and officers' clubs, then fanned the deck face down. "Ladies first." Elena drew a card without hesitation. "Queen of Hearts." Cole drew next. 7 of Clubs. Victor smiled and drew his card with theatrical slowness. "King of Diamonds. Fate smiles on the prepared," he said. "The Gatlings are mine." Cole wanted to argue, to call out the obvious possibility that Victor had stacked the deck, but what would it change? They were all criminals now. Cheating was the baseline, not the exception. "Fine," he said. "We take our share and go our separate ways. Now." "Not quite yet." Victor's expression turned serious. We need to discuss our mutual problem. Those buyers know our faces. They'll spread word that we're carrying stolen weapons and gold. Every bounty hunter, lawman, and opportunist in 3 territories will be hunting us. So we disappear, Elena said. Cross the border, change our names, never look back. That works for you two. You're nobodies, no offense intended. But I'm Duke Victor Dragunov. My face is known from St. Petersburg to San Francisco. I can't simply vanish. He leaned forward. Which is why I'm proposing one more job, one final gambit before we part ways. Cole groaned. What now? We sell information about the massacre at the mission. Tell Salazar that Cortez stole the weapons. Tell Cortez that Salazar has them. Let them tear each other apart while we slip away in the confusion. Victor's eyes gleamed. With luck, they'll kill each other and eliminate 2 of our biggest threats. And if they don't believe us? Elena asked. They'll believe what they want to believe. Salazar already suspects Cortez of treachery. Cortez already thinks Salazar is desperate enough to try anything. We'll just confirm their worst suspicions. Victor pulled out a map, spreading it on the wagon bed. There's a telegraph station here 50 miles west. We send anonymous messages to both sides. Let paranoia do the rest. Cole studied the map, his mind working through the angles. It was twisted, manipulative, and likely to cause hundreds of deaths. It was also brilliant. With Salazar and Cortez focused on destroying each other, the heat would come off the people who'd actually stolen the weapons. How do we profit from this? He asked. Survival is profit. Victor tapped the map. But if you want additional compensation, consider this. While those 2 armies are bleeding each other, the territory will be vulnerable. Border crossings will be undermanned. Checkpoints will be abandoned. We'll have a clear path to disappear with our fortunes intact. Elena looked at Cole, her expression unreadable. What do you think? What did he think? That they'd already committed enough sins to fill a ledger book. That more deaths wouldn't weigh any heavier on a conscience already crushed flat by necessity. That Victor was a madman and a genius in equal measure, and that following him was either the smartest or stupidest decision they'd ever make. I think we're all damned anyway, Cole said finally. Might as well be damned and rich. Victor clapped his hands together. Excellent. I knew you had the soul of a pragmatist, Mr. Mercer. We'll make for the telegraph station, send our messages, then split up. You 2 take your wagon north. I'll head south. We'll meet again in 6 months at the Grand Hotel in San Francisco to celebrate our mutual survival. And if one of us doesn't make it? Elena asked. Victor's smile faded slightly. Then their share gets divided between the survivors. Waste not, want not. They mounted their respective wagons and continued west as the sun climbed toward its brutal apex. The land around them grew more desolate, fewer plants, more rocks, the kind of terrain that swallowed men whole and never gave them back. Cole found himself thinking about the Cossack Victor had abandoned. The man had fought with honor in a dishonorable situation, and his reward had been a bullet-riddled death in the dust. There was a lesson there about the value of loyalty in their current circumstances. Trust no one. Rely on nothing except your own cunning and speed. Survive by any means necessary. The desert's oldest laws. The telegraph station appeared as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, a small adobe building with a wire strung between poles that marched across the landscape like skeletal sentries. A single horse was tied outside, which meant someone was present. Victor called for a halt half a mile away. We'll need to be quick. Telegraph operators tend to remember faces, and memory is dangerous. How do we handle this? Cole asked. Simple. We go in, send our messages, pay the operator generously for his discretion, and leave before he can ask uncomfortable questions. Victor checked his pistol. And if discretion proves impossible, we ensure his permanent silence. Elena stiffened. You're talking about murdering an innocent man. I'm talking about survival. Victor's voice was cold. That operator will have read our messages. He'll know we're manipulating 2 armies into destroying each other. Do you really think he'll keep that information to himself? The moment we leave, he'll sell what he knows to the highest bidder. Then we send the messages in code, Cole suggested. Something only Salazar and Cortez will understand. Too risky. Code implies conspiracy, which invites investigation. Victor shook his head. No, the messages need to be clear, direct, and believable, which means the operator becomes a liability. The casual way Victor discussed murder, like it was a minor inconvenience to be resolved, sent ice through Cole's veins. They'd killed before, all of them. But those had been enemies, soldiers, guards who'd chosen their sides. This was different. This was killing someone simply because he might pose a future threat. I won't do it, Elena said firmly. We've crossed enough lines. I won't kill an innocent man for convenience. Victor sighed. How disappointing. I thought you'd evolved beyond such sentimental attachments. He turned to Cole. And you, Mr. Mercer? Are you equally burdened by conscience? Cole thought about the Cossack dying alone, about the young revolutionary he'd tracked through the canyon, about every choice that had led him to this moment, standing in the desert with a fortune in stolen weapons and blood on his hands. I'll do what's necessary to survive, he said carefully. But I'm not killing anyone unless they're a direct threat. Everyone is a potential threat, Victor said. That's the fundamental truth of our situation. Every person who sees us, every witness to our crimes, every loose end we fail to tie up, they all become daggers aimed at our backs. Then we'll take that risk, Elena said. We send the messages, we pay the operator, we leave. If he talks, we'll be long gone before it matters. Victor studied them both for a long moment, his pale eyes calculating. Finally, he shrugged. Very well, we'll do it your way. But when this comes back to haunt us, and it will, I want you both to remember that I warned you. They approached the telegraph station with hands visible and expressions neutral. The operator who emerged was exactly what Cole had expected. Middle-aged, weathered by desert sun, with the kind of exhausted cynicism that came from spending years in isolation facilitating other people's urgent communications. Help you? He asked, his Spanish flavored with an accent Cole couldn't quite place. We need to send 2 messages, Victor said, producing a handful of gold coins that gleamed in the dying light. And we need absolute discretion regarding their content. The operator's eyes fixed on the gold. Discretion costs extra. Of course it does. Victor added more coins to the stack. Shall we proceed? They entered the small building which smelled of dust and electrical components and old coffee. The telegraph equipment sat on a scarred wooden desk, wires running out through holes in the wall. The operator settled behind his equipment with the weary competence of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. First message? He asked. Victor had prepared the text in advance. To General Salazar Cruz, Revolutionary Army of the South. Message reads, Imperial Colonel Cortez secured weapons from mission auction through treachery. Planning offensive against your positions within 48 hours. Suggest immediate preemptive strike on garrison at San Rafael. Source wishes to remain anonymous, but has imperial sympathies and opposes Cortez personally. The operator's fingers flew across the telegraph key, translating the words into dots and dashes that would travel across the wires to whatever outpost monitored revolutionary communications. His face remained neutral, but Cole saw the slight tightening around his eyes. The man knew exactly what this message meant. Second message? The operator asked when the first transmission was complete. To Colonel Reynaldo Cortez, Imperial Garrison San Rafael. Message reads, General Salazar obtained weapons through massacre at Old Mission, planning coordinated assault on your position to coincide with arrival of reinforcements. Revolutionary forces number over 300 well-armed fighters. Recommend immediate defensive preparations or tactical withdrawal. Anonymous source with revolutionary contacts. More clicks. More electromagnetic pulses carrying lies that would cost lives. The operator finished and sat back, his expression carefully blank. Anything else? He asked. That's all. Victor pushed the gold coins across the desk. For your service and your silence. The operator counted the coins, then looked up at Victor with something close to contempt. You know what these messages will do? How many men will die because of the lies you just sent? Wars kill men, Victor said mildly. We're just adjusting the timetable slightly. You're murderers. We're entrepreneurs. There's a difference. Victor turned toward the door. Remember our arrangement. You never saw us. You never sent these messages. As far as you're concerned, this evening was entirely ordinary. The operator said nothing, just stared at them with an expression that promised memory and judgment. They left quickly, mounting their wagons and putting distance between themselves and the telegraph station as fast as the horses could manage. Cole kept expecting to hear a shot, to feel the impact of a bullet from the operator who'd decided that stopping them was worth dying for. But the shot never came. They rode through twilight into darkness, navigating by stars and instinct through country that grew progressively more wild and lawless. This was the true frontier, beyond governance, beyond civilization, where only the strong and cunning survived. Finally, near midnight, Victor called for a halt in a box canyon that offered concealment and defensive positions. They made a cold camp. No fire, no light, nothing to draw attention. The horses were unhitched and allowed to rest while the three humans sat in tense silence. "What now?" Elena asked quietly. "Now we wait," Victor said. "By tomorrow afternoon, Salazar will have received his message. So will Cortez. They'll each believe the other has the weapons and is preparing an attack. Paranoia will do the rest." "And if they don't take the bait?" Cole asked. "Then we'll have slightly more difficulty crossing the border. But I suspect they'll take it. Men who lead armies want to believe they're important enough to be betrayed. We've simply confirmed what they already feared." Cole leaned back against a wagon wheel, staring up at stars that seemed close enough to touch. Somewhere out there, messages were being received, decoded, acted upon. Men were preparing for battle based on lies he'd helped create. The machinery of war was grinding into motion, and he'd pulled the lever. "We should split up at dawn," Elena said. "Put as much distance between ourselves and this place as possible." Agreed. Victor pulled a flask from his coat and took a long drink. "The Grand Hotel in San Francisco, 6 months from today. We'll celebrate our survival and perhaps discuss future opportunities." "I'm done with opportunities," Cole said. "I'm taking my share and disappearing. New name, new life, somewhere wars don't reach." "A pleasant fantasy?" Victor offered the flask to Cole, who accepted and drank. The whiskey burned going down, cutting through the dust in his throat. "But men like us don't retire, Mr. Mercer. We die or we keep playing the game. There is no third option." "He's right," Elena said softly. "I've been telling myself I'd stop after one more job for 3 years now, but here I am stealing weapons and manipulating armies. The game doesn't end. It just changes shape." They sat in contemplative silence, three criminals bound together by shared sins and mutual distrust. The canyon walls rose around them like the walls of a cell, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled at the indifferent stars. Cole must have dozed despite himself because he woke to pre-dawn gray and the sound of horses approaching. He was on his feet instantly, revolver in hand, peering over the wagon at the canyon entrance. 3 riders, armed but not presenting weapons. Their hands were visible, their posture non-threatening. Victor and Elena were already awake, weapons ready, positioned to create a crossfire if needed. The lead rider stopped 30 yards away and called out in English, "We're not here to fight, we're here to make a deal." Cole recognized the voice before he recognized the face. It was the representative from the ambushed weapons sale, the man who'd shot Victor's Cossack and sparked the firefight at the river crossing. "You've got 30 seconds to explain why we shouldn't kill you," Victor called back, "because I have information you need, about who really set up that ambush, and about the army that's coming to hunt all of us down." Cole exchanged glances with Elena and Victor. This was either a trap or something worse, the truth. "Come forward," Victor said. "Slowly. Hands where we can see them." The representative dismounted and walked forward, his movements careful and deliberate. Up close, Cole could see exhaustion written in every line of his face. This was a man who'd been riding hard with little rest, driven by desperation rather than confidence. "My name is Marcus Webb," he said. "Former U.S. Army, former arms dealer, current dead man walking." He looked at each of them in turn. "We were all played. The ambush at the river crossing? That wasn't my idea. I was following orders from someone higher up the chain." "Who?" Victor asked. "General Salazar himself." Webb pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I've got proof. Communications showing he planned the whole thing, the auction, the ambush, everything. He wanted the weapons, but he also wanted chaos. Wanted different factions fighting each other so he could consolidate power while everyone else was bleeding." Cole felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You're saying Salazar orchestrated his own defeat at the auction?" Not defeat, distraction. He never intended to buy those weapons. He planned to steal them after we killed each other fighting over them. Webb's laugh was bitter. Joke's on him, though. You three walked off with everything. Why tell us this? Elena asked. Why warn us? Because Salazar knows I failed, knows I lost the weapons and the gold. He's put a death mark on my head, same as yours. I've got maybe 48 hours before his hunters find me. Webb met Victor's eyes. I'm betting you've got a plan to get out of this territory. I'm betting you've got resources I don't. I want in. In exchange for what? Victor asked. Information, contacts, knowledge of Salazar's network and operations. Webb gestured to his companions. Plus 3 more guns when the shooting starts. And it will start. Salazar's already moving forces to lock down every border crossing, every river ford, every way out of this territory. He's not going to let you disappear with his prize. Victor walked closer to Webb, studying him with the intensity of a jeweler examining a diamond for flaws. How do I know this isn't another trap? You don't. But think about it. If I wanted you dead, I'd have brought 20 men, not 2. I'd have hit you while you were sleeping instead of announcing myself. Webb's voice carried conviction. I'm a survivor, same as you. Right now, our interests align. We can kill each other later after we're all safely across the border. The logic was sound, which made Cole trust it even less. But Webb was right about one thing. Salazar would be hunting them. Having insider knowledge of how the general operated could mean the difference between escape and execution. What do you know about the messages we sent? Victor asked suddenly. Webb blinked. What messages? Victor smiled. Good, that's the right answer. He turned to Cole and Elena. What do you think? Do we trust him? We don't trust anyone, Elena said, but we can use him. If he's lying, we kill him. If he's telling the truth, he buys us an advantage. Cole nodded agreement. The math was simple. 3 guns were better than none when facing an army. Welcome to our merry band of thieves and liars, Victor said to Webb. Break our trust and we'll leave you bleeding in the desert. Otherwise, you're in until we reach the border. Webb's shoulders sagged slightly with relief. Thank you. You won't regret this. I regret it already, Victor said cheerfully. But that's rather the theme of the past week, isn't it? Now tell me everything you know about Salazar's hunters and how they operate. We've got miles to cover and very little time to cover them. As the sky lightened toward true dawn, the group of criminals, expanded now to 6, prepared to move out. 2 wagons laden with stolen weapons and gold, 6 people who trusted each other not at all, and an entire territory's worth of enemies closing in from every direction. The game had changed again. The stakes had risen. And somewhere out there, General Salazar Cruz was plotting his revenge against the people who'd stolen his future. Cole climbed into the driver's seat of his wagon, Elena beside him, and whipped the horses into motion. Behind them, Victor and Webb followed with the second wagon and the remaining riders as guards. They rolled out of the canyon into morning light that turned the desert blood red, heading toward a border that seemed to recede further with every mile they traveled. The border was still 80 miles away when they saw the first dust cloud on the horizon. Cole spotted it from his position in the driver's seat, a brown smudge against blue sky that could only mean one thing: riders, and lots of them. He pulled the wagon to a halt and raised his hand, signaling Victor's wagon to stop as well. Webb rode forward, shading his eyes against the morning glare. That's not a patrol. That's a hunting party. How many? Victor asked, materializing beside them with his spyglass already extended. He studied the distant cloud for a long moment, his expression growing progressively grimmer. 30 riders, maybe more, moving fast and spread wide. They're not following a road, they're following tracks. Our tracks, Elena said. It wasn't a question. Salazar moves faster than I anticipated. Victor collapsed the spyglass with a sharp click. He must have had scouts watching the telegraph station. When our messages went out, he put the pieces together. Cole felt anger flare hot in his chest. You said we had time. You said the messages would buy us confusion. I said they would create chaos between Salazar and Cortez. I didn't anticipate Salazar would be smart enough to ignore the obvious bait and focus on the real threat. Victor's tone carried grudging respect. The man is more cunning than he appears. a dangerous quality in an enemy. "Cunning won't matter when we're dead," one of Webb's men said, his voice tight with fear. "We can't outrun 30 riders with 2 loaded wagons." "No," Victor agreed, "but we can outthink them." He turned to Webb. "You said you knew Salazar's tactics. How does he hunt fugitives?" Webb dismounted and used his boot to sketch rough lines in the dirt. "He spreads his forces in a crescent formation, fast riders on the flanks to cut off escape routes, heavier force in the center to drive the target into a killing zone. Once you're boxed in, he sends in the executioners. So we can't outrun them, and we can't fight them head-on." Elena studied the crude map Webb had drawn. "We need to break their formation before they can complete the encirclement. Or we need to make them think we're running in a different direction entirely." Cole pointed to a series of rocky hills to the northeast. "That terrain is murder for wagons, but perfect for hiding. If we can convince them we're headed there, buy ourselves a few hours." Victor's eyes lit with understanding. "While we actually go southwest through the flats, by the time they realize the deception, we'll be too far ahead to catch." He clapped Cole on the shoulder with genuine enthusiasm. "Mr. Mercer, you have a devious mind. I'm beginning to understand why you've survived this long." "Deception only works if they believe it," Webb said. "How do we sell the lie?" "We split up." Victor began issuing orders with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. "Cole, you and one of Webb's men take the lighter wagon northeast toward those hills. Leave obvious tracks, make noise, draw their attention. The rest of us take the weapons and gold southwest on harder ground where tracks won't show as clearly." Cole's stomach dropped. "You want us to be the bait. I want us all to survive. This is how we accomplish that." Victor met his eyes without flinching. "You'll have speed advantage with the lighter wagon and no cargo. Lead them on a chase, lose them in the rocks, then circle back and meet us at the old railway junction 40 miles southwest. We'll wait 3 days. If you're not there by then—" "You leave without us," Cole finished. "Precisely. Sentiment is expensive. Survival is priceless." Victor extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement?" Every instinct screamed at Cole to refuse, to recognize this for what it was. Victor eliminating potential competition while securing all the weapons and gold for himself. Once Cole and his companion were separated from the group, there would be nothing stopping Victor from simply disappearing with everything. But looking at that dust cloud growing larger on the horizon, Cole realized they didn't have better options. Staying together meant certain death when Salazar's hunters caught up. At least this way, he had a chance. He shook Victor's hand, feeling the dry grip of a man who smiled while planning betrayal. 3 days. The railway junction. If you're not there, I'm coming after you." "I'd expect nothing less." Victor turned to Webb's men. "Which of you volunteers to accompany Mr. Mercer?" The 2 men exchanged glances, neither eager to draw the short straw. Finally, the younger one, barely 20, with a scar across his jaw from some old knife fight, stepped forward. "I'll go. Name's Daniel. I can shoot and I know how to disappear in rough country." "Excellent." Victor began transferring supplies between wagons with ruthless efficiency. Water, ammunition, enough food for 4 days. No weapons except rifles and sidearms. Weight is your enemy now. Speed is your friend. Elena helped with the transfer, her movements mechanical, her face unreadable. When she passed close to Cole, she pressed something into his palm, a small leather pouch that clinked softly. Gold coins, he realized. Insurance in case Victor's betrayal was as inevitable as it seemed. "Stay alive," she whispered. "You too." Within 10 minutes, the wagons were reconfigured. Cole's wagon was stripped down to essentials, light enough that the horses could maintain speed over rough terrain. Victor's wagon was laden with weapons, gold, and the weight of potential fortune. Cole climbed into the driver's seat, Daniel beside him with a rifle across his knees. Behind them, Victor raised a hand in salute that might have been mocking or genuine. With Victor, it was impossible to tell. "Good hunting, Mr. Mercer. Try not to get killed. I'd miss our philosophical discussions." Cole didn't dignify that with a response. He whipped the horses into motion, angling northeast toward the rocky hills, while Victor's wagon turned southwest into the flat expanse of hardpan and scattered sage. For a few minutes, they traveled in proximity, 2 wagons diverging on separate paths. Then distance opened between them, and Cole lost sight of Victor's wagon behind a swell of ground. They were truly separated now, each group betting their lives on luck and cunning in equal measure. "Think they'll actually wait for us?" Daniel asked, his young face tight with tension. "Doesn't matter what I think. Matters what we do." Cole focused on the terrain ahead, plotting a route that would be visible enough to draw pursuit, but not so obvious it looked like a trap. "We need to leave tracks clear enough that a blind man could follow them, make Salazar's hunters commit to chasing us. And then? Then we disappear like smoke and pray we're smarter than them." The rocky hills loomed closer, a jumbled maze of stone and shadow that offered both opportunity and danger. Cole pushed the horses hard, letting the wagon's passage churn up dust and leave deep wheel ruts in the softer ground. Behind them, he could see the dust cloud of Salazar's forces growing closer, resolving into individual riders now. They'd taken the bait. Cole counted roughly 20 horsemen breaking off from the main group, following the obvious trail northeast. The remaining forces continued in their crescent formation, probably assuming Victor's wagon would try to slip through while they were distracted. Both groups were wrong, which meant the deception was working exactly as planned. "They're gaining," Daniel said, his voice climbing toward panic. "We're not going to reach the hills before they catch us." "We don't need to reach them. We need to get close enough that they commit to the chase." Cole whipped the horses harder, coaxing more speed from animals already lathered with sweat. "When I say jump, you grab your rifle and whatever supplies you can carry. We're abandoning the wagon." "What? You're insane." "No, I'm practical. The wagon's the target. Without it, we're just two men in a landscape full of places to hide." Cole steered toward a section of hills where massive boulders had tumbled down from higher elevations, creating a maze of stone corridors and dead ends. "Salazar's men are looking for a wagon. They'll chase it even after we're gone." "And how exactly do we make it run without us?" Cole pulled a length of rope from beneath the seat. "We tie the reins pointed at the roughest terrain and let gravity do the rest. By the time they catch up to an empty wagon, we'll be miles away." It was desperate, improvised, and likely to get them killed, but staying in the wagon guaranteed death when the faster horses inevitably caught them. They reached the boulder field as gunfire erupted behind them, Salazar's hunters close enough now to take shots at the wagon. Bullets whined past, one punching through the wooden seat inches from Cole's leg. The horses screamed in terror, their eyes rolling white, but kept running through pure instinct. "Now!" Cole shouted. He and Daniel vaulted from the moving wagon simultaneously, hitting the ground hard and rolling to absorb impact. Cole's shoulder blazed with pain, and his rifle went flying, but he scrambled up and dove behind a boulder as more gunfire chased him. The wagon continued without them, reins tied and wheels bouncing wildly over increasingly rough ground. It careened between boulders, somehow staying upright, vanishing into the maze of stone like a ghost ship disappearing into fog. Cole pressed his back against sun-heated rock and fought to catch his breath. His shoulder felt like it might be dislocated, and blood was running from a cut somewhere on his face. Beside him, Daniel appeared in better shape but equally winded. The sound of pursuing horses grew louder, then changed direction as the hunters followed the wagon deeper into the boulder field. Cole heard shouted orders in Spanish, the crack of rifles, the thunder of hooves on stone. Then, blessedly, the sounds began to recede. They'd bought themselves minutes, maybe an hour, if luck held. "We need to move," Cole whispered. "Back the way we came, then circle wide. Put distance between us and anyone searching these hills." Daniel nodded, too out of breath to speak. They began working their way through the boulders, moving with the cautious silence of men who knew every sound could be their last. The sun was merciless, turning the stone maze into an oven that baked them from all sides. They'd gone maybe half a mile when Cole heard the wagon crash. The sound was unmistakable: splintering wood, the scream of horses, the crunch of something expensive and irreplaceable being destroyed by physics and gravity. Shouts of anger and confusion followed as Salazar's hunters discovered the wagon was empty. The deception had worked. But now came the dangerous part: escape before the hunters spread out and began a methodical search of the entire area. Cole found his bearings by the sun and began leading Daniel west, paralleling the hills but staying within their concealing shadow. They moved in silence, communicating with hand signals, stopping frequently to listen for pursuit. By mid-afternoon, they'd put 5 miles between themselves and the boulder field. The landscape opened into rolling scrubland dotted with creosote bush and the occasional skeletal juniper. Water was becoming a concern. They'd grabbed one canteen in their desperate exit from the wagon, barely enough for a day in this heat. "We're not going to make it to the railway junction without water," Daniel said, voicing what Cole had already calculated. "Not on foot. Not in this temperature. There's a ranch about 15 miles southwest, abandoned years ago, but there might be a well that still works." Cole studied the horizon, seeing no immediate threats, but knowing Salazar's forces were still out there, searching. "If we push hard, we can reach it by nightfall. And if the well's dry? Then we die of thirst instead of bullets. Pick your preferred ending." They walked through the afternoon heat, rationing water with miserly discipline, each sip barely enough to wet cracked lips. Cole's shoulder had settled into a deep, throbbing ache that suggested muscle damage rather than dislocation. Small mercy. Daniel proved tougher than his age suggested, maintaining pace without complaint even as the sun hammered down and the landscape shimmered with heat mirages. He'd lived hard already, Cole realized, probably seen things that aged a person beyond their years. "Why'd you sign on with Webb?" Cole asked during a brief rest in the shadow of a rocky outcrop. "Money. Same as everyone." Daniel took a careful sip from the canteen. "My family had a farm near the border. Revolutionaries burned it, killed my father, took my sister. Webb's operation was recruiting, and I had nothing left to lose." "Your sister?" "Dead, probably. Or worse." Daniel's voice was flat, emptied of emotion by grief too large to process. "The revolution eats people, chews them up and spits out whatever's left. I figured if I couldn't save her, at least I could profit from the same chaos that destroyed everything I loved." Cole understood that logic. The desert had a way of turning victims into predators. Sometimes it was the only way to survive. They reached the abandoned ranch as twilight bled the heat from the air. The buildings were collapsed ruins, roofs caved in and walls crumbling back into the earth they'd come from. But the well stood intact, its stone rim worn smooth by generations of hands that had drawn water here. Cole dropped a pebble down the shaft and listened. The faint splash that returned was the most beautiful sound he'd heard all day. "There's water." They hauled up bucket after bucket, drinking until their bellies sloshed, then refilling the canteen and every container they could improvise from debris around the ranch. The water was mineral-heavy and tasted like stone, but it was wet and it was cold, and it meant they wouldn't die tomorrow. As darkness settled over the land, they made a cold camp in the ruins of what had once been a barn. No fire, no light, nothing to reveal their position to anyone searching. They ate dried meat from their supplies and tried to rest, though sleep came in fits and starts, broken by imagined sounds of pursuit. Cole woke near midnight to find Daniel on watch, silhouetted against stars so bright they cast actual shadows. "Can't sleep?" Cole asked quietly. "Thinking about Victor and the others, whether they made it through Salazar's net." Daniel kept his eyes on the darkness. "Whether they'll actually wait at the railway junction or just take everything and run." "Smart money says they run." "Then why are we trying to reach them?" Good question. Cole had been asking himself the same thing. The rational choice was to forget the railway junction, forget Victor and Elena and the whole cursed expedition, and just disappear into the borderlands with whatever he could scavenge. But the gold Elena had pressed into his palm wasn't enough to buy a new life. And despite everything, despite the betrayals and the blood and the absolute certainty that Victor was a monster, Cole found himself wanting to see how this ended. Whether there was honor among thieves, or whether it was all just temporary alliances dissolving the moment profit could be maximized. "Because we're not smart enough to quit while we're behind," Cole said finally. Daniel laughed quietly. "Fair enough." They moved out at first light, heading southwest toward the railway junction with renewed energy from rest and water. The land grew progressively more desolate, fewer plants, more alkali flats that reflected sunlight like mirrors, forcing them to squint against the glare. By noon on the second day, they spotted smoke on the horizon. Cole's first thought was wildfire, but the smoke was too localized, too controlled. Someone had set a deliberate blaze. The question was who and why. They approached cautiously, using terrain for cover, rifles ready. The smoke came from what had once been a small settlement, maybe a mining camp or way station, now reduced to smoldering ruins. Buildings had been systematically burned, their adobe walls cracked and blackened by intense heat. And in the center of the destruction, bodies. 8 men, all dead from gunshot wounds, arranged in a neat row like trophies. Cole recognized military-style execution when he saw it. These men had been captured, disarmed, and killed with professional efficiency. "Salazar's work?" Daniel asked, his voice tight. Cole studied the scene, noting details. The bodies wore mixed uniforms, some imperial, some revolutionary, some civilian, an odd collection for a single faction to execute. "No, this is something else." He found his answer near what had been the settlement's well, fresh wagon tracks deep and heavy, heading southwest. The same direction they were going, and near the tracks, a playing card pinned to a post with a knife. The King of Diamonds. Victor's calling card. "He was here," Cole said, a chill running down his spine despite the heat. "Within the last 12 hours. Why leave a card?" Message, warning, or maybe just ego. Cole studied the tracks. These men must have tried to rob him or block his passage. He killed them all and burned the settlement to make a point. What point? That Duke Viktor Dragunov doesn't negotiate. He destroys. Cole pulled the card free, studying Victor's mark. He's telling anyone following that pursuit ends in death. They continued southwest, now following the wagon tracks with growing unease. The massacre at the settlement revealed something important. Victor had enough firepower and ruthlessness to take on superior forces and win. The Gatling guns, probably, used to devastating effect against men who thought they were ambushing an easy target. The railway junction appeared on the third day, exactly where Webb's maps had indicated it would be. An abandoned switching station where 3 different rail lines had once converged, back when this territory had mining operations large enough to support industrial infrastructure. Now it was just weathered buildings and rusted track disappearing into windblown sand. And in the shadow of the main building, 2 wagons. Cole felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. They'd waited. Against all odds and expectations, Victor and Elena had actually waited. He and Daniel approached openly, hands visible, rifles slung. No point in sneaking. Anyone in those buildings would have seen them coming for miles across the flat approach. Victor emerged first, looking remarkably fresh despite 3 days in the desert. He'd somehow maintained his appearance, his coat still immaculate, his expression carrying its usual mixture of amusement and calculation. "Mr. Mercer and young Daniel, I confess, I'd given you even odds of survival at best." "Well done." Victor gestured toward the buildings. "Come in out of the sun. We have much to discuss." Elena appeared in the doorway, and Cole felt genuine relief at seeing her alive and apparently unharmed. She nodded to him, something complicated in her expression, maybe respect, maybe shared exhaustion at having survived this long against increasingly terrible odds. "Any trouble?" Cole asked as they entered the relative cool of the station building. "Nothing we couldn't handle." Victor poured water from a ceramic jug into tin cups and distributed them. "A small skirmish with some of Salazar's advanced scouts. 8 men who thought they could capture us and claim a reward. We disabused them of that notion quite thoroughly. We saw the bodies and the burned settlement. Yes, well, I wanted to send a clear message about the consequences of interference." Victor sipped his water delicately. "Word will spread. Future hunters will think twice before engaging us directly." "You're creating a reputation," Elena said quietly. "Making yourself more recognizable, not less." "Reputation is armor, sister. Fear prevents more attacks than invisibility ever could." Victor set down his cup. "But enough philosophy. We have practical matters to address. The border is still 40 miles away, and Salazar has concentrated forces along every traditional crossing point. Webb's intelligence indicates at least 3 separate garrisons watching the river." Webb himself appeared from the back room, looking haggard but alert. "I've been monitoring telegraph transmissions using the old equipment here. Salazar and Cortez did receive your messages, and they did exactly what you predicted. They're currently engaged in heavy fighting around San Rafael. Both sides have committed significant forces to the battle." "Excellent," Victor said with satisfaction. "While they're bleeding each other, the border defenses are weakened. Opportunity and chaos, as always." Weakened isn't the same as undefended, Cole pointed out. We still have to cross a river with 2 loaded wagons while avoiding whatever forces Salazar left in place. Which brings us to the final gambit. Victor unrolled a map on the table, using rocks to hold down the corners. There's an old smuggler's crossing here, 15 miles west of the main ford. The river runs shallow over bedrock, passable for wagons if you know exactly where to cross. Most importantly, it's not on any official maps. How do you know about it? Elena asked. I make it my business to know the hidden paths, useful when one regularly engages in activities that attract official attention. Victor traced the route with his finger. We cross there at night, minimal light, maximum speed. By dawn, we're on the other side and beyond Salazar's reach. And if the crossing is defended anyway? Daniel asked. Victor's smile turned sharp. Then we use the Gatling guns and carve our own path through whatever opposition presents itself. I didn't come this far to be stopped by geography and poorly paid soldiers. Cole studied the map, looking for problems in the plan. The route made sense tactically, using darkness and terrain to minimize exposure, but it required split-second timing and absolute commitment. Any hesitation at the crossing point could be fatal. When do we move? He asked. Tonight. We rest during the heat of the day, depart at sunset, reach the crossing around midnight. Victor's expression turned serious. This is the culmination of everything we've done. Success means wealth and freedom. Failure means death or capture. And I assure you, Salazar will make any captured parties wish for a quick death. They spent the afternoon preparing, checking weapons, redistributing supplies for optimal weight balance, planning contingencies for every scenario they could imagine. Webb proved invaluable, his military experience showing in the thoroughness of his preparations. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of copper and blood, the group gathered for a final briefing. 6 people, 2 wagons, enough stolen weapons to outfit a small army, and a desperate gamble at reaching safety before their pursuers could stop them. Victor stood before them like a general addressing troops before battle. Understand this. The next 12 hours will determine whether we're remembered as clever thieves or cautionary tales. Speed is essential. Silence is crucial. If someone falls behind, we don't stop. If someone is wounded, we don't slow down. The wagons and their cargo are the priority. Everything else is secondary. Including our lives, Elena said. Especially our lives. Each of us chose this path knowing the risks. Victor met each person's eyes in turn. But if we succeed, we'll have earned something rare in this world, victory through cunning rather than virtue. And we'll be wealthy enough to write our own stories rather than living in someone else's. Cole had to admit, Victor knew how to deliver a speech. Even knowing the Duke would sacrifice any of them without hesitation, there was something compelling about his absolute confidence, his refusal to acknowledge the possibility of failure. They mounted the wagons as twilight deepened to full dark. Victor drove the lead wagon with Webb beside him. Cole drove the second with Elena, while Daniel and Webb's remaining man rode as rear guard on horses they'd acquired from the settlement. The small convoy rolled out under a sky blazing with stars, heading west toward the border and whatever waited beyond. The landscape was different at night, transformed from brutal wasteland to something almost beautiful, all silver shadows and mysterious sounds. Coyotes called to each other across the darkness. Night birds swooped through the air, chasing insects. The desert came alive in ways sunlight never revealed. They traveled without lights, navigating by starlight and Victor's apparently perfect memory of the terrain. The wagons rolled through arroyos and across alkali flats, their passage marked only by the creak of wood and the steady rhythm of hooves on hard-packed earth. Cole kept his attention split between the trail ahead and the darkness behind, watching for any sign of pursuit. Salazar wouldn't give up simply because they'd evaded his hunters this long. The general was invested now, his reputation damaged by the theft. He'd pursue them across any border, through any territory, until either they were dead or he was. Around 11, Victor called a halt at the top of a rise that overlooked a river valley. Below them, perhaps 3 miles distant, Cole could see the dark ribbon of water cutting through the landscape. The border. Safety. Everything they'd killed for. But between here and there, between current position and future freedom, lay the killing ground. Even in darkness, Cole could make out the shapes of men and horses along the riverbank. Salazar had garrisoned the crossing after all, deploying forces to watch the one route Victor had counted on being undefended. "How many?" Elena whispered. Victor studied the scene through his spyglass, his jaw tight. 20, maybe 25, well-positioned in defensive works along both banks. They're expecting us. "How?" Webb's voice carried shock and betrayal. "That crossing isn't on any maps. Only a handful of people even know it exists." "Someone talked," Victor said flatly. "Either the telegraph operator or someone else we encountered. Doesn't matter who. What matters is they're waiting, and we need to cross anyway." "That's suicide," Daniel said. "We'd be exposed the entire crossing. They'd cut us down before we made it halfway across." Victor lowered the spyglass, his face a mask of consideration. For a long moment, he said nothing, clearly running calculations that included acceptable losses and maximum profit. Finally, he spoke. "There's another way. Riskier, more dangerous, but possible if we're willing to sacrifice one wagon." Cole felt his stomach drop. "What are you proposing?" "A diversion. One wagon charges the crossing from the south, drawing fire and attention. While they're engaged, the second wagon crosses 2 miles upstream where the defenses are lighter." Victor's pale eyes glittered in starlight. "The diversion wagon will likely be destroyed. Anyone aboard will almost certainly die, but the other wagon will make it through." "You're talking about suicide," Elena said, her voice cold with fury. "Asking someone to die so you can escape with the weapons and gold. I'm talking about mathematics. 6 people, 2 possible outcomes. Option 1, we all try to cross together and all die. Option 2, half of us sacrifice ourselves so the other half survives." Victor's tone was infuriatingly reasonable. "I prefer option 2. The question is, who volunteers?" No one spoke. The weight of Victor's proposition hung over them like a death sentence waiting to be assigned. Cole thought about the Cossack left to die at the river crossing, about the young revolutionary bleeding out in the canyon, about every choice that had led to this moment, standing in darkness while contemplating murder disguised as sacrifice. "I'll do it," he heard himself say. The silence that followed Cole's words stretched like wire pulled to breaking point. Elena turned to stare at him, her face pale in the starlight. "You can't be serious." "Someone has to do it," Cole said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "And I've got the least to lose. No family, no home to go back to. Just a drifter who's been running his whole life." He met Victor's eyes. "But I want something in return." Victor's expression shifted to something approaching respect. "Name your price." "My share of the gold gets delivered to an address in Santa Fe. There's a woman there who lost her husband to this war. She's got 3 children and nothing else. The money goes to her." "Sentimentality, Mr. Mercer? I'm surprised." But Victor nodded. "Agreed. Your share will be delivered as specified. You have my word." "Your word isn't worth the air it takes to speak it," Elena said bitterly. She grabbed Cole's arm, pulling him aside. "This is insane. You'll die for nothing. Victor will keep the gold and laugh about your stupidity all the way to San Francisco." Cole looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the woman beneath the layers of deception and survival instinct. Somewhere under the hardness, under the calculated pragmatism that had replaced whatever idealism she'd once possessed, there was still someone who cared whether he lived or died. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but maybe I'm tired of running, tired of surviving by becoming something I don't recognize in the mirror. This way, at least I choose how it ends, on my terms, for a reason that matters." "Dying doesn't matter. Living does." Elena's voice cracked slightly. "We could both run right now, take our chances on foot, disappear into the desert, start over somewhere they'll never find us. You don't believe that any more than I do. Salazar will hunt us forever. Victor will hunt us if we take what's his. There's no starting over, Elena. There's just different ways of ending." Cole touched her face gently. "Go with Victor. Take your share. Get across that border and don't look back." "I won't let you do this alone," she said suddenly, her jaw set with determination. "If you're going to die making a distraction, then I'm driving that wagon with you." "Touching," Victor interrupted, his voice cutting through their moment. "But we're wasting time. Salazar's forces could be moving to reinforce the crossing as we speak. We need to execute this plan now or abandon it entirely." Cole turned back to the group. Elena's right. I'll need someone else. The wagon needs to look like a legitimate crossing attempt, not a suicide run. Two people, armed, making a desperate break for freedom. That's what will draw their fire and attention. Daniel stepped forward. I'll go with you. You don't have to, Cole started. Yes, I do. My family's dead. The revolution destroyed everything I cared about. I've been surviving on hate and money for 3 years, and I'm tired too. Daniel's young face was set with conviction. Let me do something that matters. Let me help someone else escape instead of just killing for profit. Webb looked at his young companion with something like grief, but he nodded slowly. Your choice, son. Make it count. Victor was already organizing the division of cargo. The weapons stayed with his wagon, the real prize, the items his mysterious buyer was actually paying for. Most of the gold went with him as well, though he did set aside several bars and placed them in the diversion wagon. Bait needs to look convincing, he explained. If they capture this wagon and find nothing of value, they'll know immediately it was a feint. How generous, Elena said with acid in her voice. Leaving us gold to die with. Leaving them gold to make their sacrifice meaningful, Victor corrected. The math is simple, sister. 2 lives versus 4. Honor their choice by making it effective. The preparations took 20 minutes. Cole and Daniel loaded their wagon with enough weapons and ammunition to make a stand, along with the gold bars Victor had allocated. They checked the horses, tightened the harness, planned their approach to the crossing. Webb pulled Daniel aside for a quiet conversation, pressing something into the young man's hand, probably money or some personal item. A surrogate father saying goodbye to a surrogate son, both of them knowing this was the last time they'd speak. Elena approached Cole as he was checking his rifle. Her face was composed, but her hands trembled slightly as she reached out and took his. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Thank you feels inadequate. I'm sorry feels like cowardice. Then don't say anything. Cole squeezed her hand. Just promise me something. When you get across that border, when you're safe and rich and building whatever life comes next, promise me you'll remember that not everyone here was a monster. That some of us tried to be better than we were. I'll remember. She pulled him close, kissing him hard, a gesture of goodbye and gratitude and shared understanding of what they'd both become in this terrible place. I'll remember all of it, Victor called out, his voice carrying across the darkness. Positions, everyone. We move in 5 minutes. Mr. Mercer, Daniel, you approach the southern crossing point from the east, traveling at normal speed as if unaware of the garrison. When they challenge you, you break and run for the water. Drive them into defensive positions. Make them commit their forces. How long do we need to hold their attention? Cole asked. 15 minutes from first contact. That gives us time to reach the upstream crossing and get our wagon across while they're focused on you. Victor's pale eyes glinted. Make every second count, gentlemen. Your deaths buy our lives. Let's ensure the exchange rate is favorable. Cole and Daniel climbed into their wagon while Victor, Elena, Webb, and Webb's remaining man mounted the second wagon. For a moment, the two groups sat parallel, two futures diverging, one toward life and profit, the other toward death and meaning. Then Victor whipped his horses forward, and his wagon rolled away into darkness, heading west toward the upstream crossing. Elena looked back once, her face a pale blur. Then the night swallowed them whole. Cole and Daniel sat in silence, listening to the sound of the other wagon fading into distance. When it was gone completely, Cole gathered the reins and turned their wagon east, then south, approaching the river crossing from the angle Victor had specified. You scared? Daniel asked quietly. Terrified, Cole admitted. You? Same. But also, I don't know. Relieved? Like I've been carrying something heavy for years and I'm finally allowed to set it down. Daniel checked his rifle's action. My sister's name was Maria. She was 14 when they took her. I tried to find her, tried to save her. Never could. Never even found her body. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm just telling you so someone knows. So when we're dead, someone in this world will remember that Maria existed and her brother tried to do right by her, even if he failed at everything else. Daniel smiled sadly. Stupid, isn't it? Wanting to be remembered when you're gone. Not stupid. Human. Cole urged the horses forward. My real name isn't Mercer. That's just what I've called myself for the last 8 years. My real name was Cole Brennan. I had a wife and a daughter once, back in Missouri. Lost them both to fever while I was away at war. Came home to graves instead of family. Is that why you became a drifter? That's why I became a coward who ran from anything that hurt to feel. Spent years telling myself survival was enough, that not dying was the same as living. Cole felt something loosen in his chest, a weight he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it was there. Maybe tonight, I finally learned the difference. The river came into view, a dark ribbon reflecting starlight. Along its banks, Cole could now see the garrison clearly. Men behind earthwork barriers, rifles ready, horses tethered nearby for rapid pursuit. 25 soldiers, just as Victor had estimated, all of them waiting for exactly what Cole and Daniel were about to deliver. When we hit the water, aim for the north bank, Cole said. Don't stop for anything. If I'm hit, keep driving. If you're hit, I keep driving. We make them work for this. Understood. Daniel's hands were steady on his rifle. You think Victor will actually keep his promise? About the gold going to that widow? No. But I like to think Elena might make him. She's harder than she looks, and she's got a conscience still fighting to survive under all the pragmatism. Cole smiled grimly. Besides, it doesn't matter. We'll be dead. Can't spend gold in a grave. They approached the crossing at a steady pace, as if they were just travelers hoping to cross before dawn. The wagon rolled through scrub brush, wheels crunching on gravel, horses breathing steadily in the cool night air. 50 yards from the river, a voice called out in Spanish. Halt! Identify yourselves! Cole pulled the horses to a stop, raising his hands in apparent surrender. American citizens seeking to cross the border. We have business in Texas. At midnight, in a wagon loaded with cargo? The voice was skeptical, hard. Step down from the wagon, slowly. Keep your hands visible. Now! Cole shouted. He whipped the horses forward with explosive force, the wagon lurching into motion. Beside him, Daniel opened fire on the earthworks, his rifle cracking repeatedly as he aimed for muzzle flashes and silhouettes. The garrison erupted into chaos. Rifles barked from a dozen positions, bullets tearing through the night. One punched through the wagon's backboard. Another took off Cole's hat. A third struck the seat between him and Daniel, sending splinters flying. But they were moving. The horses panicked into a gallop, charging directly at the river crossing through a storm of lead. Cole heard shouting in Spanish, officers calling orders, soldiers repositioning to create a killing field at the water's edge. Exactly as planned. Every gun turned toward them was a gun not watching the upstream crossing where Victor and Elena were making their run. The wagon hit the river with a tremendous splash. Water surged around the wheels, deeper than expected, pulling at the horses and wagon with surprising strength. The current was faster here, more treacherous, threatening to sweep them downstream into rocks. Daniel kept firing, his shots forcing soldiers to keep their heads down. Cole focused on keeping the wagon moving forward, whipping the horses desperately as water rose to the wagon bed. Halfway across, one of the horses screamed and went down, a bullet in its chest. The wagon slewed sideways, tilting dangerously as the current caught it. Cole cut the fallen horse free with his knife, sacrificing the animal to keep the wagon from capsizing entirely. The remaining horse struggled valiantly, but it wasn't enough. The wagon ground to a halt on a sandbar in midstream, stuck fast with 30 feet of water still between them and the north bank. We're not going to make it, Daniel said, his voice eerily calm as he reloaded. No, Cole agreed, but we're going to make them pay for stopping us. They abandoned the driver's seat and took cover behind the wagon bed, using the cargo as protection. The gold bars made surprisingly effective barriers against bullets, absorbing impacts that would have punched through wood. Soldiers were moving to flank them, wading into the water from both banks. Cole and Daniel fired methodically, making each shot count, dropping soldiers who got too confident or moved too carelessly. Minutes stretched into eternity. The wagon became an island fortress in the middle of the river, 2 men holding off an entire garrison through sheer determination and accurate shooting. Bodies floated downstream, blood darkened the water. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the scent of river mud and fear. Cole lost track of time. His shoulder blazed with pain from the rifle's recoil. His ears rang from the constant gunfire. Beside him, Daniel fought with the efficiency of someone who'd stopped caring about survival and focused only on making his death mean something. Then Cole heard it, distant gunfire from upstream. Victor's wagon had reached the crossing. The garrison was splitting its attention now, some forces breaking off to pursue this new threat. "They're going to make it," Daniel said, grinning through blood from a scalp wound. "We actually did it. We bought them enough time." As if in answer, a bullet took Daniel in the chest. He gasped, his rifle falling from nerveless fingers, and pitched forward into the water. Cole grabbed for him but missed, watching helplessly as the current carried the young man downstream, his body rolling limply over rocks before disappearing into darkness. Rage and grief, and something close to pride, surged through Cole. Daniel had died buying freedom for people who probably didn't deserve it. But he died choosing meaning over survival, and that had to count for something. Cole kept firing, one man against 24, impossible odds made irrelevant by pure defiance. He was dimly aware of being hit, once in the leg, once in the side, but adrenaline and determination kept him upright. The distant gunfire upstream had stopped. Either Victor's wagon had been destroyed, or it had made it across. Cole chose to believe the latter. Let Elena live. Let her carry forward whatever remained of conscience in this whole bloody mess. His ammunition was running low. 5 rounds left. 5 rounds. Then 4. Then 3. A voice called out in Spanish, ordering him to surrender, promising mercy if he laid down his weapons. Cole laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. He'd seen what Salazar's mercy looked like, seen the executed prisoners, the burned settlements, the bodies left as warnings. He fired his last rounds, each shot deliberate, each one a small act of defiance against the machinery of war and greed that had consumed everything. Then the hammer fell on an empty chamber. Soldiers rushed the wagon from all sides. Cole drew his knife, determined to go down fighting, but something hit him from behind and the world tilted sideways. He was in the water, being dragged toward shore, hands wrenching the knife from his grip. He tried to fight, but his strength was gone. Blood loss and exhaustion and the weight of too many sins finally pulling him under. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the stars overhead, cold and distant and beautiful, indifferent witnesses to everything that happened in the world below. Cole woke to pain so intense it felt like being born. His entire body was a map of wounds, bullet holes, knife cuts, bruises that went bone deep. He tried to move and discovered his hands were tied behind his back, his ankles bound to the legs of a chair. He was in a tent. Canvas walls, simple furnishings, the smell of gun oil and unwashed bodies. A guard stood by the entrance, rifle held casually but eyes alert. "He's awake!" the guard called out. Footsteps approached, and then General Salazar Cruz entered the tent. Up close, the revolutionary leader was even more intimidating than Cole remembered, all hard edges and ruthless calculation wrapped in a veneer of ideological righteousness. Salazar pulled up a chair and sat, studying Cole with the detached interest of a scientist examining an interesting specimen. "The American mercenary," he said in English. "You've caused me considerable trouble, Mr. Mercer. Or should I call you Mr. Brennan? Yes, we know your real name, know quite a lot about you, in fact." Cole said nothing, conserving energy. "You're probably wondering why you're still alive," Salazar continued. "I'll be honest. Most of my men wanted to shoot you immediately. You killed 8 of them during your little stand in the river. 8 trained soldiers dead because one stubborn fool refused to surrender." There was something like respect in his tone. "But I stopped them. Do you know why?" "Because you want to know where the weapons went," Cole said, his voice raspy from thirst. "Partly, but also because I'm curious about something." Salazar leaned forward. "Why did you do it? You weren't charging that crossing thinking you'd survive. You were sacrificing yourself deliberately. Why?" Cole thought about lying, about protecting Victor and Elena. Then he realized it didn't matter. By now they were either across the border and beyond Salazar's reach, or they were dead. His words couldn't change that. "Because I was tired of being a coward," he said simply. "Tired of surviving by becoming something monstrous. I wanted one moment, one choice, that meant something beyond profit." Salazar studied him for a long moment. "And the people you were protecting, the ones who crossed upstream while you died for them? Gone. Across the border by now, your weapons with them." Cole smiled despite the pain. You lost, General. Viktor Dragunov outplayed you from the beginning. The fake jewels, the auction massacre, the telegrams. All of it was designed to keep you chasing ghosts while the real prize slipped away. Fury flashed across Salazar's face, quickly suppressed. Viktor Dragunov. The Duke. Yes, I know him. Know his reputation for chaos and profit. He stood, pacing. Those weapons were supposed to arm my revolution, Mr. Brennan. We're supposed to give my people a fighting chance against the Imperial forces that have oppressed them for generations. Instead, they'll be sold to the highest bidder, used to fuel more wars, create more suffering. Your revolution would have done the same thing, Cole said. Different flag, same blood. Same widows and orphans and burned homes. Don't pretend your cause was noble just because it had a political label. Salazar's hand moved to his sidearm, and for a moment Cole thought this was it. The end. A bullet in the head as payment for speaking truth. But the general controlled himself. You're right, he said quietly. The revolution has consumed everything it promised to save. I've become the same kind of monster I swore to destroy. He sat again, suddenly looking older, tired. But at least I still fight for something beyond myself. What do you fight for, Mr. Brennan? What ideology drives you? Survival used to be enough. Then it wasn't. Cole met his eyes. I'm not asking for mercy. I know what I've done. Know what I deserve. Just tell me, did the other wagon make it across? We don't know. The forces at the upstream crossing reported engaging a wagon, but it escaped into the darkness before they could capture or destroy it. Salazar pulled out a knife, testing its edge. So your sacrifice may have worked, or you may have died for nothing. You'll never know which. I know, Cole said. I know because I chose. That's enough. Salazar stood, nodding to the guard. Take him to the river. Execute him there. Let his body wash downstream as a warning to anyone else who thinks they can steal from me. The guard grabbed Cole, dragging him to his feet. Pain exploded through his wounds, but he refused to cry out. He'd done many things in his life to be ashamed of, but he wouldn't give Salazar the satisfaction of hearing him beg. They walked him to the river as dawn was breaking, painting the water gold and red, the same river where Daniel had died, where Cole had made his stand. Soon it would claim him too, washing away all evidence that he'd ever existed. The guard forced him to his knees at the water's edge. Cole closed his eyes, thinking about his wife and daughter waiting somewhere beyond death. Thinking about the widow in Santa Fe who might or might not receive the gold he'd bargained for. Thinking about Elena crossing into safety, carrying with her the last shreds of conscience from this whole bloody affair. He heard the guard cock his rifle. Then he heard something else, a distant sound that didn't belong. Shouts of alarm from the camp, the thunder of hooves. Cole opened his eyes to see chaos erupting. Riders were attacking the camp from the east, firing rifles and pistols, scattering soldiers who'd been relaxed in the assumption of victory. The guard beside Cole turned toward the threat, distracted for a fatal second. Cole surged upward despite his bound hands, hitting the guard with his shoulder. They went down together into the shallow water, Cole using his weight and desperation to hold the man under. The guard struggled, his rifle firing wild, but Cole kept him down until the struggling stopped. He rolled off the dead man, gasping, trying to understand what was happening. The attack wasn't a large force, maybe 6 riders, but they were striking with precision, targeting officers and creating maximum confusion. Then one of the riders broke away from the fighting and galloped toward the river. As the rider got closer, Cole's heart nearly stopped. Elena. She leaped from her horse and splashed into the water, a knife in her hand. Hold still, she commanded, cutting through the ropes binding his wrists. You came back, Cole said stupidly. Of course I came back. Did you really think I'd leave you to die after you saved all our lives? She hauled him to his feet. Can you ride? Can I? Cole looked at the chaos in the camp, at Salazar screaming orders, at soldiers trying to organize a defense. Where did you get the men? Mercenaries from across the border. Paid them with some of the gold Viktor didn't know I'd hidden. Elena shoved him toward a riderless horse. Mount up. We need to go now before they regroup. Cole grabbed the saddle horn, pulling himself up through sheer willpower. His wounds screamed protest, but adrenaline carried him through. Elena mounted her own horse, firing twice to discourage pursuit. "Retreat!" she shouted to the mercenaries. "We got what we came for!" The hired guns broke off their attack and galloped away, leaving behind a camp in disarray. Cole and Elena rode with them, putting distance between themselves and Salazar's stunned forces. They rode hard for an hour before Elena called a halt in a rocky defile that offered concealment. The mercenaries immediately began arguing about their payment, but Elena distributed gold coins with practiced efficiency, sending them on their way satisfied. When they were alone, she turned to Cole with an expression caught between fury and relief. "That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen," she said. "You nearly died." "I did die. You brought me back." Cole slid from his horse, his legs barely holding him. "The others? Victor? Webb?" "Across the border, dividing up the weapons and gold as we speak." Elena helped him sit, beginning to examine his wounds with competent hands. "Victor was furious when I took some of the gold and doubled back. Said it was sentimental stupidity. Webb understood, though. He'd lost Daniel and didn't want to lose anyone else." "Daniel died well," Cole said. "Died choosing meaning over survival. So did you. You just got a second chance to regret it." Elena pulled out medical supplies, beginning to clean and bandage the worst of his injuries. "These are bad, Cole. You need a real doctor. Rest. Time to heal." "Later. Right now I need to know. Was it worth it? Did Victor keep his word about the gold for the widow?" Elena smiled slightly. "I made sure of it. Took a larger share than Victor liked and arranged for delivery to Santa Fe myself. That woman and her children will have enough to rebuild their lives 3 times over." Something tight in Cole's chest finally relaxed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm still a thief and probably damned for everything we've done." Elena finished bandaging his side. "But maybe we can be damned and still try to do right by people who deserve better than this world gives them." They rested for 2 hours, then rode slowly toward the border. The crossing was easier now, with papers Elena had procured and enough gold to bribe any official who looked too closely at travel documents. By noon, they were on American soil. The war, the revolution, Salazar and Cortez and their endless conflict, all of it left behind in a country that would bleed itself dry, fighting over scraps. Cole and Elena rode to a small town 20 miles from the border and found a doctor who asked no questions when paid in gold. The wounds were cleaned, stitched, bandaged properly. The doctor warned Cole he'd carry scars for life but would survive if infection didn't set in. They rented a room above a saloon and collapsed into real beds for the first time in weeks. Cole slept for 16 hours straight, his body demanding payment for all the abuse he'd subjected it to. When he woke, Elena was sitting by the window, staring out at the dusty street below. "Victor sent a telegram," she said without turning. "The weapons have been sold. His buyer paid in full. Our share is waiting at a bank in El Paso." "How much?" "Enough to disappear and never work again. Enough to buy ranches or shipping companies or passage to anywhere in the world." She finally looked at him. "Enough to start over, if starting over is what we want." Cole sat up carefully, testing his injuries. Everything hurt, but it was the honest pain of healing rather than the sharp agony of fresh wounds. "What do you want?" "I don't know anymore. I spent 3 years telling myself I was preventing a war, and instead I helped fuel it. Helped steal weapons that will kill thousands. Made choices that turned me into someone I don't recognize." Elena's voice was quiet, contemplative. "I thought I wanted freedom and wealth. Now I'm not sure those things mean anything. Then we find something that does mean something. Something worth more than gold or survival." Cole stood, walking to the window beside her. "That widow in Santa Fe, she'll use the money to rebuild. Maybe we could help, not with more money, but with labor, building instead of destroying for once." Elena looked at him, something like hope flickering in her eyes. "You'd do that? Give up the fortune to hammer nails and pour foundations?" "The fortune doesn't change what we are, doesn't wash away the blood or make us better people." Cole took her hand. "But maybe honest work for honest purpose could. Maybe we can't redeem everything we've done, but we can try to balance the scales slightly." "That's a long road, Cole Brennan. Years of work to offset months of destruction." "I've got time. And I've got someone to walk that road with if she's willing. He smiled. Besides, the alternative is becoming like Victor, rich and empty, playing games with human lives until someone finally puts a bullet in us. I'd rather die building something than destroying. Elena squeezed his hand. Then we'll go to Santa Fe. We'll meet this widow. We'll see what kind of rebuilding needs doing. She paused. But first we need to settle accounts with Victor. Make sure he doesn't decide we're loose ends worth tying up. 2 weeks later, Cole and Elena arrived in El Paso. The wounds had healed enough that Cole could move without constantly wincing, though the scars would indeed mark him for life, physical reminders of choices made and prices paid. The bank was a solid brick building that looked more fortress than financial institution. Inside, a clerk verified their identities and led them to a private room where their share of the proceeds waited. Gold bars and paper currency stacked neatly, representing more wealth than Cole had earned in his entire previous life. Enough to corrupt, to tempt, to make every sacrifice seem worthwhile. Beside the money was a note in Victor's elegant handwriting. My dear Mr. Brennan and sister Elena, congratulations on your survival and Elena's touching rescue operation. I confess, I doubted whether sentiment would prove stronger than self-preservation, but you've demonstrated there are still romantics in this cynical world. Your share is complete as promised. I suggest you take it and disappear before Salazar manages to cross the border in pursuit. As for me, I'm off to San Francisco and then perhaps Europe. The world is full of wars and opportunities for those with the vision to profit from chaos. If you ever tire of rebuilding and wish to return to more lucrative pursuits, you know where to find me. Until we meet again, VD. He thinks we'll come back, Elena said, reading over Cole's shoulder. Thinks we'll spend this money and need more, come crawling back to his games. Let him think that. Cole folded the note and dropped it into the banker's wastebasket. We know different. They took half the gold and left the rest in the bank with instructions to establish a trust for the widow in Santa Fe and her children. Then they bought train tickets north, leaving behind the borderlands and the blood-soaked territory where they'd both learned hard truths about survival and meaning. Santa Fe appeared through the train window 3 days later, adobe buildings and mountain backdrop, a city that had weathered centuries of conflict and somehow maintained its beauty. The widow's home was a small ranch outside town, the buildings weathered but solid. Her name was Maria Castellano, and she met them at the door with suspicion in her eyes, a woman who'd learned not to trust strangers bearing gifts. We're the ones who sent the gold, Elena explained. We wanted to make sure it arrived and see if there was anything else you needed. Maria studied them both, her gaze sharp and assessing. Finally, she nodded. The money arrived. Changed everything. I was about to lose the ranch, lose everything. Now my children have a future. She paused. Why? Why would strangers send a fortune to someone they've never met? Cole thought about how to answer that. About Daniel dying in the river. About choices made and prices paid. About trying to balance scales that could never be truly balanced. Because someone we knew believed you deserved better than this world was giving you, he said finally. And because we needed to believe we could still do something good after doing so much wrong. Maria looked at them for a long moment, then stepped aside. Come in. It's not much, but I have coffee, and you look like you've traveled far. They entered the small home, simple but clean, where 3 children played in the afternoon light streaming through windows. A home built on the foundation of blood money, yes, but a home nonetheless. A place where life continued despite all the death that had funded it. Over coffee, Maria told them about her husband, a soldier who died fighting for something he believed in, leaving her alone with children to raise. She told them about the struggles of the past year, the debts mounting, the fear of losing everything. Now I have hope again, she said. Can rebuild the ranch, hire workers, make this place productive, give my children the education their father wanted for them. She smiled, and it transformed her worn face. I don't know what you did to get that gold, and I won't ask, but I'll honor it by using it well, by building instead of destroying. Cole and Elena stayed in Santa Fe for 6 months, working on Maria's ranch alongside hired hands. They rebuilt fences, repaired buildings, brought in new livestock, hard physical labor that left them exhausted each night but sleeping without the nightmares that had plagued them both. Slowly, the weight of what they'd done began to lift slightly, not disappear. The dead didn't return. The burned settlements didn't rebuild themselves. The war continued regardless of their conscience. But the work gave them purpose beyond survival. The gold they'd kept for themselves sat largely untouched in the El Paso bank. They drew from it sparingly, enough to live modestly, nothing extravagant. The fortune Victor had promised turned out to be a burden as much as a blessing, a constant reminder of the price others had paid for their wealth. One evening, sitting on the porch and watching the sun set over distant mountains, Elena broke a long silence. "Do you ever regret it? The rescue? The choice to come here instead of taking the money and running?" Cole thought about it honestly. "No, I regret what we did to get the money. Regret the lives lost, the chaos we helped create. But this?" He gestured to the ranch, to the sound of children laughing inside the house. "This feels like the first honest thing I've done in years. Victor would call us fools." Victor calls everyone fools who don't share his philosophy of profit above all else. Cole smiled. "But Victor's going to die alone and rich, probably killed by someone he betrayed. We're going to die knowing we tried to build something, tried to make amends for the destruction we caused." Elena leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "That's a better ending than I thought I'd get when I first put on that nun's habit and decided to prevent a war. You didn't prevent it, but you helped save one family from its consequences. Maybe that's enough." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the land. Somewhere to the south, the war continued. Salazar and Cortez still fought their endless battle. Victor was probably in some European capital, plotting new schemes and finding new conflicts to profit from. But here, in this small corner of the world, there was peace. Temporary, fragile, bought with blood, but peace nonetheless. A year after arriving in Santa Fe, Cole and Elena married in a simple ceremony with Maria and her children as witnesses. They used some of the remaining gold to buy a small piece of land adjacent to Maria's ranch, building a modest house with their own hands. The work was hard but rewarding. They raised horses, helped Maria expand her operations, became part of the community they'd chosen. The past remained. Scars on Cole's body, shadows in Elena's eyes, memories that woke them both occasionally in the dead of night. But the future was theirs to build. No telegram came from Victor, no summons to new adventures or profitable schemes. Perhaps he'd moved on to other pawns in his endless games. Perhaps he'd finally met someone more ruthless than himself. It didn't matter. That life was behind them. 2 years after the events at the river crossing, a stranger appeared at their door. He was well-dressed, carried himself with military bearing, and introduced himself as Colonel Matthews, U.S. Army Intelligence. "I'm investigating weapons trafficking in the borderlands," he explained when Cole invited him inside. "We've been tracking a shipment of stolen military arms. The trail led us to several names, including yours, Mr. Brennan." Cole and Elena exchanged glances. The past had finally caught up. "What do you want?" Cole asked. "Information, testimony. Help locating the people who organized the theft." Matthews pulled out a folder thick with papers. "We know you were involved, know you crossed paths with a European national named Viktor Dragunov. We also know you've been living quietly here for 2 years, working honest labor, staying out of trouble." "So?" Elena asked carefully. "So I'm offering a deal. Help us locate Dragunov and his network and we'll grant immunity for your involvement. You testify, we get the people at the top of the smuggling operation, everyone moves on with their lives." Matthews leaned forward. "Otherwise, I arrest you both right now for weapons theft and smuggling. You'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison." Cole felt the weight of the choice settling over him. Betray Victor, who'd used them as pawns but kept his word about payment, or protect a monster and lose everything they'd built here. "What happens to the gold we sent to Maria Castellano?" Elena asked. "The trust fund for her children?" "That's separate. Charitable donation, legally transferred. It stays with her regardless of what you choose." Matthews pulled out more papers. "But any remaining funds you possess would be seized as proceeds of criminal activity." "We don't have much left," Cole said honestly. "Spent most of it on this land and helping with Maria's ranch." "Then you've already paid a price of sorts." Matthews studied them both. "Look, I'm not interested in destroying your lives. You've clearly made efforts to go straight. But Dragunov is still out there, still trafficking weapons, still fueling conflicts. Help me stop him, and you get to keep building this life you've made. Cole and Elena stepped outside to discuss privately. If we give him Victor, we're betraying someone who kept his word to us, Elena said. If we don't, we lose everything. This land, this life, the chance to keep making amends. Cole looked at the house they'd built, the ranch where Maria's children played. Victor chose his path, chose to keep playing games with human lives. We chose differently. So we betray him. We tell the truth. Let justice handle the consequences. Cole took her hand. We can't build a new life on foundations of protecting old sins. They went back inside and told Matthews everything. The fake jewels, the auction massacre, the arms deal, the river crossing. They gave him names, locations, details about Victor's network and methods. Everything except the identities of the dead, Daniel, the Cossacks, the young revolutionary in the canyon. Those people deserve to rest without their names in official reports. Matthews recorded it all, his expression growing progressively grimmer as the full scope of the operation became clear. This is bigger than I thought, he admitted when they finished. Dragunov has been operating for years, multiple countries, dozens of conflicts. You've given us enough to build a case that will bring down his entire network. What happens now? Cole asked. You'll testify when we catch him. Until then, you're free to continue your lives here. Just don't leave the territory without notifying me. Matthews stood, gathering his papers. And Mr. Brennan? Mrs. Brennan? Thank you. I know this wasn't easy. After he left, Cole and Elena sat in silence, processing what they'd done. Think we made the right choice? Elena asked. I think we made the only choice that lets us sleep at night, Cole replied. Victor's a monster. Maybe we were monsters too for a while, but we're trying to be better. Part of that is not protecting people who profit from death. 6 months later, they received word that Victor Dragunov had been arrested in Paris. The case would take years to prosecute, but the evidence was overwhelming. His network was dismantled, his assets seized, his influence shattered. Cole and Elena testified via written deposition, their names kept confidential for security reasons. When it was done, they were finally truly free of the past. The ranch prospered. Maria's children grew healthy and educated. The community around them thrived, built on honest work and mutual support. Cole and Elena never forgot what they'd done to get here. The blood spilled, the lives lost, the fortune stolen and spent in pursuit of redemption. But they also never stopped trying to build something better than what they'd destroyed. Years passed. Cole's hair turned gray. Elena's hands grew calloused from honest labor. They grew old together, surrounded by the life they'd chosen over Victor's promise of endless wealth and adventure. On quiet nights, sitting on their porch and watching stars wheel overhead, they sometimes talked about Daniel, about the Cossacks who'd died loyally serving a master who saw them as disposable, about the widow in Santa Fe whose life had been built on blood money but who'd used it to create genuine good. Do you think it balanced out? Elena asked once. All the death we caused versus the life we helped preserve. No, Cole said honestly. The scales never balance perfectly. We can't bring back the dead or undo the harm, but we can keep trying, keep building, keep choosing meaning over profit. That's enough? It has to be, because it's all we have. They sat together as darkness claimed the land, two former criminals who'd found redemption not in forgiveness but in endless effort toward something better. The past remained, permanent and unchangeable, but the future was theirs to build, one honest choice at a time. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for, the chance to be better tomorrow than they were yesterday, to choose meaning over survival, to build instead of destroy. The game Victor had promised would never end had ended after all, not with victory or defeat, but with withdrawal. Cole and Elena had stepped away from the table, walked away from the fortune, chose a different kind of wealth entirely. They'd survived. But more importantly, they'd learned to live. And that made all the difference.